21. I have a lot of soul skills. With Iliex's reassurance, Kong Ming'an no longer hesitated. He walked slowly to the front of the beast ceiling platform, his expression composed as he faced his elder. Kong Deming said nothing more. He pressed his palm against the platform, releasing a surge of spirit power that quickly broke several of its core seals. The silver-white pillar split open, and the true form of the bound spirit beast emerged, cocooned in chains of light and deep in slumber. It was a dragon-type spirit beast, about 3 meters long, bristling with dark spines and covered in dark silver diamond-shaped scales. Its body was lithe and elegant, and its tail was lined with bony, thorn-like segments. Perhaps because it had been captured just as it reached the 10,000-year threshold and had not fully adapted to that power, faint spatial ripples leaked from its body. A cold glinting spirit dagger appeared in Kong Ming'an's hand. With a flick of his wrist, it became a precise streak of light and drove into the thorny dragon's vital point. There was no struggle, no roar. The fully sealed thorny dragon was helpless. It twitched instinctively, then its life force drained away. After a brief pause, a deep black haloed spirit ring rose slowly from its corpse, a 10,000-year spirit ring. Kong Ming'an did not hesitate. He sat cross-legged, letting threads of spirit power flow from him to bind and envelop the black spirit ring, then began to draw it toward himself. As the ring entered his body, a massive surge of energy cascaded into him. His tempered meridians and physical body groaned under the influx. His chi and blood circulated like boiling lava, stabilizing his body against the violent impact. Under his absolute control, he guided the storm of energy from the ring into his dantian for transformation and absorption. At the same time, the eye of life on his forehead opened. A gray phantom, visible only to him, an intangible soul-level presence, emerged and fixed its attention on the spirit ring. The thorny dragon's soul, roused from its slumber, reacted fully. Its silver vertical pupils burned with ferocity and venom, its hatred at death irreconcilable. It concentrated what remained of its power, preparing to unleash a final, devastating soul shock. But before it could, an incredibly pure and vast gray light rose. Iliex had acted. The thorny dragon, sensing the threat, barely assumed a defensive posture before a hand of gray light seized its soul. With no cry, the thorny dragon's soul was wrenched from the ring and taken by Iliex. Being the soul of a 10,000-year spirit beast, it would be preserved for use later. Iliex then poured his purifying power into the spirit ring, cleansing the last fragments of soul from it, and returned quietly to the Eye of Life. The whole intervention happened in an instant. Only Kong Deming, with his 98th level cultivation, sensed something was different, though he could not tell exactly what, and chose to trust his grandson. The potentially dangerous soul shock that might have followed was prevented before it began. The absorption smoothed out, and Kong Ming'an's aura gradually stabilized. Kong Deming relaxed. The Hongchen siblings beside him exhaled as well, though they still stood guard, watching the figure wrapped in the black light of the spirit ring. Time passed slowly. The entire absorption took 3 full hours. Because the ring was unusual, the space around Kong Ming'an occasionally distorted and folded. Sometimes 1 or 2 hair-thin, pitch-black fissures flashed and vanished. At last, when the last trace of energy was taken in, the deep black spirit ring subsided and disappeared. Kong Ming'an opened his eyes. In the depth of his ink-black pupils, countless tiny silver spatial lights twinkled and vanished, making his gaze seem even more profound. Ignoring the stares around him, he raised his hand. A black spirit ring materialized slowly from his palm and slipped onto his wrist, a 10,000-year ring. With that, Kong Ming'an personally shattered the ironclad rule of the Dulo world that a first ring could only be a 100-year one. He lowered his eyes to the ring in his hand. Its light was restrained, but unlike ordinary spirit rings, it exuded an immense, heart-stirring power and faint, mysterious spatial fluctuations. A small smile touched his lips. The result of the experiment with Elder Iliex had been validated. Xiao Hongchen said nothing, but his eyes were ablaze as he stared at the genuine 10,000-year ring on someone else's wrist. Although he still considered the owner a scoundrel most of the time, he had to admit, this ring was incredibly cool. It even seemed different from normal 10,000-year rings, with silver patterns and a spatial aura. He was already scheming how to get that secret taught to him. Kong Deming stood quietly nearby, watching his grandson with a satisfied expression. Ming'an, Ming'an. Meng Hongchen couldn't contain her curiosity. Her ice-blue eyes sparkled. You succeeded? What are your spirit abilities? Are they powerful space-type abilities? Kong Ming'an did not answer at once. He furrowed his brow, an expression unusual on his face, and studied the 10,000-year ring as if sorting through impressions. After a moment, he traced it lightly with a fingertip. Invisible spatial ripples spread out, but what showed itself was more than simple space power. Everyone leaned in, waiting for him to speak. For a long pause, he said nothing. Finally, he raised his head. His voice carried a note of uncertain astonishment as he said slowly, "My spirit abilities seem to be a lot. Let me organize them before I explain." Silence fell over the once quiet laboratory. Xiao Hongchen clutched his head as if a brainwave had struck him. "What do you mean? A lot?" "Just what I said." Kong Ming'an spread his hands, a little helpless. "From what I can sense now, there's probably dozens of spirit abilities." A stunned, heavy silence followed. Kong Ming'an didn't answer right away. He lowered his gaze to the spirit ring in his hand. Over the past year or so, while he had concentrated on cultivation, Iliex had quietly continued researching spirit rings. With dozens of soft-bones rabbits sacrificed every day to probe the nature of a spirit ring, Iliex had finally, a few months ago, reached a preliminary understanding. After a moment's thought, Kong Ming'an looked up at the Hongchen siblings and at his elder, then spoke in a calm, measured voice. "A spirit ring comes from a spirit beast. If you completely dissect a spirit beast, you can roughly divide its composition into 4 parts: the body, the soul, mental force, or you could call it memory, and the most fundamental thing, spirit power. When a spirit beast is killed, its body stays behind, while the spirit ring is made up of the remaining soul, the memories, and the spirit power." He paused and used a clearer analogy. "Think of a spirit ring like the semi-automatic soul-guided rifle I built when I had time on my hands. The spirit power is the rifle's casing. It carries the internals, which are the memory and the soul. The spirit beast's memories, especially those tied to how it used its powers in life, form the soul skill modules, like the firing pin, gas system, recoil spring inside a rifle. The remnant soul of the spirit beast is the trigger mechanism that activates those soul skill modules. And the final bullet is the spirit power the spirit master injects." He summarized. "So the process of using a spirit ability is this. The spirit master injects spirit power into the spirit ring. That power activates the remnant soul. The remnant soul drives a specific soul skill module. The module releases a spirit ability. That, in essence, is what a spirit ring and spirit abilities are. This idea," he added slowly, "I'll call the spirit ring tripartite theory." Xiao Hongchen felt his head buzzing as if something new had been added to his brain. Meng Hongchen looked half puzzled, half entranced. She could tell the theory was significant, but she couldn't quite explain why. Only Kong Deming's eyes shone with the look of someone who'd found a new continent, his gaze flickering with thought. Kong Ming'an continued. "Imagine a soft-bones rabbit that had 3 spirit abilities in life: teleportation, paragon golden body, and charm. If an ordinary spirit master without any special inclination kills it and absorbs its spirit ring, they'll only end up using one of those 3 abilities. That doesn't mean the other 2 abilities vanished. They still exist as soul skill modules inside the ring. The problem is that the remnant soul left after the beast's death is incomplete and weak. It can only anchor and trigger one module and thereby solidify that one ability. The other modules, mixed in with the beast's useless memory fragments, lie dormant deep inside the ring. This explains a lot of phenomena. For example, why a 100,000-year spirit ring often has 2 spirit abilities, because the soul of a 100,000-year spirit beast was strong enough that, even incomplete, it can anchor and trigger 2 modules. He left the next point hanging in the air. This idea also hinted at why future spirit souls could grant multiple rings and many abilities. A more complete soul could control and trigger more modules. The Snow Empress's spirit soul from the original work was an example of that. Kong Deming had already followed the thread and asked, so if a spirit beast's soul is complete enough, one ring can trigger several abilities. Theoretically, yes, Kong Ming'an said, but not practically. The limitation is the carrying capacity of a spirit ring. He smiled and simplified the concept. Say a spirit ring has 10 units of capacity. In a natural ring, the incomplete soul of the spirit beast takes up about 4 units. The beast's complex, useless memory fragments take another 3. All the soul skill modules together occupy the remaining 3 units. The single spirit ability most spirit masters use, solidified by the remnant soul, often only needs a small fraction of those 3 units, maybe 10% or less. The more complete the beast's soul, the more space it will occupy. But the ring's total capacity is fixed, so the soul tends to squeeze out memories and modules to reach balance. He didn't pause this time. The spirit-soul system is similar. A complete spirit soul would occupy the vast majority of capacity. My guess is it might take up to 90%, leaving only 10% for spirit abilities. It can still manifest multiple skills by occupying multiple spirit ring positions. That's why absorbing spirit souls requires such a high mental force rank, because the pressure comes not just from the spirit ring itself, but from the spirit beast's soul as well. In short, he concluded with the calm tone of a researcher, in naturally formed spirit rings, remnant souls and useless memory fragments consume most of the capacity, while a treasure trove of soul skill modules is buried and wasted. That's structural inefficiency, extreme waste. In my case, before absorption, I completely purified and erased the spirit beast's soul inside this ring. The huge capacity once taken by that remnant soul has been freed. I can use my own will to actively perceive, connect, and mobilize the potential soul skill modules within the ring. If nothing goes wrong, this 10,000-year spirit ring will give me at least a double-digit number of soul skill modules, each one an independent spirit ability. In other words, a single spirit ring can genuinely contain multiple spirit abilities. But there's a drawback. Everything requires manual operation. He summoned his spirit ring as an example and explained slowly. With normal spirit rings, you inject spirit power, and the remnant soul automatically completes the triggering, guiding, and releasing process. It's idiot-proof. Now, using myself as an example, if I want to use a spirit ability, I must precisely locate the module I want. I have to control the amount, attribute, output mode, range, and strength of the spirit power I inject, then lock onto the target and release it. Any mistake at any step could make the ability fail, greatly weaken its effect, or even cause a spirit power backlash. For most spirit masters used to idiot-proof operation, learning to do all this is like learning to speak. It will take a lot of time and practice. 23. Who is an evil soul master? After Kong Ming'an finished speaking, the laboratory fell silent again. What he had just laid out was stark and simple. The pros and cons of removing residual souls from spirit rings were extreme. The upside was enormous, the possibility that a single ring could possess multiple spirit abilities. For traditional spirit masters who rarely had more than 9 abilities, that would be revolutionary. The downside was just as terrible. Failure could cripple a ring, causing permanent loss of spirit abilities and an irreversible drop in combat power. This technology is still experimental, Kong Ming'an said. The basic theory has many gaps. I won't publicize this for now. You can just listen. He was honest. The sample size was tiny. Including himself and Iliex, they only had 2 real successful cases, and neither example was an ordinary one. Kong Ming'an had exceptional control over various forms of energy, which let him end experiments at the first sign of danger and preserve himself while experimenting by trial and error. Iliex was even more exceptional. Though technically a residual soul, his soul was high quality, and his accumulated experience and command of different energies made outright failures rare. The successes of those 2 could easily be dismissed as anomalies, far from universally reliable. Still, the world never lacked gamblers. For many spirit masters, risking a spirit ring for the chance to gain extra spirit abilities would be an irresistible choice. Unexpectedly, someone in the lab raised a hand. Ming'an, I think I can do it, Xiao Hongqian said with confidence. Kong Ming'an glanced at him and shook his head. No, you can't. Xiao Hongqian blinked and flushed. Kong Ming'an smiled at the reaction, then reached into his storage spirit tool ring and produced 10 small, circular silver-white instruments. He held them out. These are soul catchers. They can extract residual souls from rings under 1,000 years and purify the ring, like what I did with my current ring. Keep one for yourself and give the rest to people you trust. Have them record their process of attempting to comprehend the purified ring and send the records to me. Kong Deming, his elder, understood at once and put the soul catchers away. What Kong Ming'an wanted was simple: more samples. Theory without data was a castle in the air. The 9-level soul engineers under his elder were perfect candidates. They all had solid control of spirit power and mental force, placed less value on their spirit rings, and were still close enough that the benefits would be kept in the family. Under the circumstances, there were no better test subjects. Seeing Xiao Hongchen's uneasy look, Kong Ming'an gave him a small smile. Don't rush. Train step by step. If nothing unexpected happens, you'll likely be able to enjoy the results directly. Really? Absolutely. A moment later, Kong Deming and the others left, and the lab quieted down. Kong Ming'an went to a workbench and tapped it twice. A section of the adjacent wall slid inward, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside sat a dignified old man with a long white beard, the kind of face that would be instantly recognized by anyone from the Holy Spirit cult. If any of them had been present, they'd know this man as Nanggong Wan, the second elder of the Holy Spirit cult and alliance master of the Sunset Water Alliance, who had claimed he was going into seclusion. Kong Ming'an pressed his glabella and the Eye of Life flared. A gray stream of light flowed into the old man's body. Moments later, the man, Nanggong Wan, opened his eyes and stepped out of the compartment, moving a little stiffly. "Iliex, thank you," Kong Ming'an said, his tone edged with genuine gratitude. The quality of his first spirit ring owed much to Iliex. Iliex, speaking through Nanggong Wan's body, smiled and waved it off. "No need. The spirit ring research benefited me too. If not for your ideas, I wouldn't have thought to use this method to temporarily possess a body." He let his hands fall back, and the air around him rippled. 9 gray spirit rings materialized, each engraved with elaborate circuits and emanating a faint, sacred light. The aura that emanated from him was already beyond that of an ordinary titled Duluo, and he was holding himself back. No one could be certain of his true limits. This was one of the results of their work over the past year. At first, they had discovered that removing residual souls from rings could free up a ring's carrying capacity. Kong Ming'an then had a darker thought. If a ring could be thoroughly cleansed, could it serve as a vessel for a soul? Iliex confirmed the idea, and together they extended the theory. If a spirit master's soul was removed and their rings were fully purged, it might be possible to control that spirit master's body by borrowing the rings. Theory gave way to practice. 3 wicked spirit masters, 1 spirit king, 1 spirit saint, and 1 spirit Duluo, were later sacrificed in experiments. From their deaths was born what they called the possession method. It wasn't possession in the sensational, supernatural sense seen in some old novels. It was closer to puppetry. They called it possession because that was the aspiration, an ability to inhabit another's body and make it do their will. The user was Iliex. Ordinary spirit masters were not adequate vessels. At minimum, the temporary body had to be a titled Duluo. Kong Ming'an chose his target carefully. Nanggong Wan happened to be in Mingdu, a high-profile figure and the alliance master of the Sunset Water Alliance, an ideal candidate. With a combination of a surprise attack and prior preparation, Kong Ming'an's elder, a level 97 titled Duluo, overpowered Nanggong Wan, a level 92 wicked spirit master, and handed him over. They removed Nanggong Wan's soul, processed the body, and provided it as a temporary vessel for Iliex. Was that inhumane? To outsiders, it certainly sounded brutal. But in their eyes, wicked spirit masters were less than beasts, mere consumables whose only value was how they could be used. To Kong Ming'an and his circle, they were simply making the most of resources. 4. The wizard is the master. The wizard is the master. A moment later, Iliex stepped aside, casually picked up a soft-bones rabbit, and went back to his research for the day. Before he resumed, he handed a luminous white spirit ring to Kong Ming'an. Inside the ring was a soul skill module capable of opening the undead demigod plane. Kong Ming'an turned the ring over in his hand and sighed softly. "So much to do. I hope I can catch up with the plan I made." So far, His research into spirit ring self-editing and reconstruction was roughly halfway finished. The self-editing portion was basically complete. Iliex could already condense specific soul skill modules within a spirit ring himself. Those 9 special gray spirit rings were the fruit of his work. Kong Ming'an's progress lagged a bit behind and would take time to match. To summarize his goals, there were 4 main points. The first was to become familiar with every soul skill module already contained in the spirit ring, achieving fluid use of all of them. That was the absolute foundation. If one couldn't even manage that, perhaps this route wasn't for them. They might be better off as a body cultivator, which relied on refining the body rather than intricate manipulation. The second point was that after uncovering all usable soul skill modules from a spirit ring, he would completely remove all other useless memories belonging to the spirit beast, maximizing the ring's carrying capacity. That was the basis for the later self-editing. The third point was, after mastering the ring's modules, to attempt to construct soul skill modules independently to reproduce spirit abilities without depending on a spirit ring at all. Once that could be done, the ring would no longer restrain the spirit master, and only then would spirit ring utilization reach its true limit. The fourth point extended the third. With the ability to construct soul skill modules at will, he could remove all pre-existing modules from the ring and free up its full capacity. He would then rebuild the ring by adding modules according to his own designs, completing the spirit ring's self-editing. At this stage, someone might ask, if you can already use spirit abilities without a ring, why bother reconstructing and re-adding soul skill modules to the ring? Isn't that redundant? Kong Ming'an had a ready answer. Suppose a spirit ring's carrying capacity limit is 100, and a fireball soul skill module takes 1 unit. You could plug in 100 fireball modules, and when activated through the ring, they would be instant, 100 fireballs hurled at once. Yes, fireball itself isn't extraordinary, but imagine a soul skill module like Paragon Golden Body. If a ring carried 100 Paragon Golden Body modules, how much margin for error would that give a spirit master? Modules are independent. Their cooldowns are individual. In theory, with enough modules, you could maintain a continuous cycle. Then there's the question of spirit power consumption. Whose spirit power could support such expenditure? Kong Ming'an's answer was simple. The spirit ring itself is a huge energy storage. Activating soul skill modules through the ring doesn't draw solely from the spirit master, but from the energy stored in the ring. The goal was to let the ring achieve a degree of self-sufficiency. This was the second cultivation path Kong Ming'an had developed after body cultivation. He called it spell cultivation. Compared to body cultivation, spell cultivation has a far higher threshold and endless variations. He murmured, "Tsk, a mage is still a mage." He laughed softly, then stopped indulging his thoughts. Stretching, he sat on a nearby futon, summoned his spirit ring, put it on, and closed his eyes. I'll set a small goal for myself. Before coming out of seclusion, I will be able to use all the soul skill modules in the spirit ring skillfully, and I will engrave the soul skill module that opens the undead demigod plane onto the ring. Meanwhile, in Mingdu, inside an ordinary restaurant, 2 figures sat by the window on the 2nd floor, watching the bustling street while they ate and drank. They were Da Ming and Ming, spirit beasts who had been ordered by a certain god king to kill a certain person. "Big brother, that punk sent another letter," Ming said with disgust, slapping a folded note down on the table. Its content roughly demanded to know why they hadn't finished the job yet, threatening to turn hostile if they delayed further. Da Ming regarded the note calmly. "Watch your tone," he said neither harshly nor gently. "He's a god king, after all." Ming sulked. "God king? What kind of god king is he? For 3 months he's been nagging us, pushing us to risk our necks while he sits back so grandly." Da Ming glanced at him, then shook his head. "We're spirit beasts whose essences have reached god level. Under the rules of the god realm, he can kill us at any time, and no one would stop him. To him, we are ants." Ming fell silent, drinking sullenly. Da Ming sighed, then asked abruptly, "Have you found out where this Kong Ming'an is?" "No," Ming replied. "His whereabouts have been deliberately concealed. There were rumors he'd be at the Sun Moon Army camp, but investigations proved those false. I see. We've done what we could. If we can't find him, there's nothing more to do. Deming breathed out in slight relief. Tang San had the right to execute them at any time. Without constant surveillance, they still had to obey and come to Mingdu to carry out orders. Fortunately, they discovered a way to survive. From several attempts, Daming had confirmed that Tang San could no longer constantly keep his gaze fixed on the Duluo plain as before. At most, he glanced at it occasionally. That gave them breathing room. For the past year and a half, they had managed to stall. As long as their target didn't show up directly in front of them, and Tang San didn't force immediate action, they could keep delaying. Deming had a strong intuition. If they kept postponing, they might live a while longer, perhaps until the God King finally lost patience. But if they launched a direct attack, there would probably be no good outcome. Better to let things take their course. 25. Undead Demiplane. As the body tempering method quietly spread through the Sun Moon Empire's armies and produced ever more impressive results, Kong Ming'an's reputation among the Empire's upper echelons grew to almost mythic proportions. This was different from the old fame he'd inherited as the Kong family's heir. Now his renown came from a cumulative influence, backing from the imperial family, the nobility, and the military. What he delivered was simply too valuable to ignore. Beyond the army reforms from the body tempering method, the ring tempering method, still restricted to a handful of level 9 soul engineers in the Hall of Worship, had already vaulted the Empire's cornerstone fighters up to level 98 in just a few years. In effect, he had single-handedly narrowed the gap between the Sun Moon Empire and the top military powers among the three great Duluo empires. Unaware of the political effects rippling out from his work, Kong Ming'an had gone into quiet seclusion, familiarizing himself with his soul skill modules. By the end of the first semester at the Sun Moon Royal Soul Engineer Academy, he had mastered everything above the Spirit Ring level and finally condensed the soul skill module to activate the undead demigod plane into his Spirit Ring. Phew, finally done. He sat down on the futon, exhaustion in his posture, but a bright spark in his eyes. Teleportation, spatial barrier, spatial severance, spatial domain. One 10,000-year spirit beast could possess as many as 26 different spirit abilities when analyzed, yet a spirit master normally claimed only one when hunting spirit rings. He couldn't tell whether the traditional spirit master system was wasteful in its design or intentionally set up to monopolize spirit beasts' potential. The more he studied the system, the more its limitations and inefficiencies irritated him. After 10,000 years, no one had optimized it. No one had tried to break its constraints. Was that due to suppression and the nobles' monopoly over the spirit master path? Kong Ming'an couldn't decide. He pushed the thoughts aside and concentrated on the soul skill module he'd carved to open the undead demigod plane. As he poured in his spirit power, faint spatial ripples spread before him. A gray door, suffused with an aura of sanctity and death, slowly opened. The undead demigod plane. A small world, separate from the Duluo plane, vast enough to hold countless beings, able to be opened anywhere within the Duluo plane. He extended his mental force, slipped through the doorway, and his consciousness entered the plane. He looked around and was instantly struck by the dead silence. Countless dormant auras filled the landscape. Skeletons lay in ranks, ordinary skeletons, armored undead knights, and even dozens of bone dragons whose bulk rivaled small mountains. Their auras slept, but the undead fire within them still burned steady and low. With the authority Old Yi had granted him, Kong Ming'an could command them to rise at will. Seeing the scale of the undead army, he finally understood how Old Yi had been able to overturn an entire world. Old Yi had even told him this was only a fraction of his legion. Its peak strength was far greater. Another trump card. Relieved, Kong Ming'an withdrew his consciousness from the demigod plane and rose from the futon. Rather than leave the laboratory the normal way, he activated the subtle spatial technique he'd added. Silver-white ripples shivered the air, and a flash of light. Later, he was back in his own room. The spatial elements settled, and he stretched, feeling the fatigue wash away. He stepped into the bathroom, letting warm water soothe him, then changed into a clean white casual outfit. Standing before a full-length mirror, he straightened his collar and thought over his plans. He needed to check on Miss Meng's cultivation progress, handle matters for the Ming'an Merchant Association, and make a trip to Shrek City soon. He pushed open the lab corridor door and walked out. The Kong family's inner quarters were off-limits to outsiders, hushed and solemn. As he rounded the corner past his laboratory entrance, a figure made him slow down. A girl about his age sat tucked behind the corner, watching his lab door. She wore a light purple dress and white stockings. Her short, wavy purple hair framed a delicate face, and her deep purple eyes darted covertly toward the door. On her skirt was a subtle sun-moon royal emblem, an emblem that shouldn't be anywhere inside the Kong family compound. The sight struck him as odd. After a moment's thought, he fitted on a mimetic mask made by Jing Hongqian and approached silently from behind. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" The sudden voice made the girl start and spin around. Her eyes flicked over his unremarkable face. She recognized him a little and, seeing he wasn't someone she feared, relaxed. "You scared me," she said, then quickly composed herself. "Hello, my name is Shu Tianzhen." She blinked at him with an air of easy familiarity. "You look like you belong to the Kong family. Are you an insider? You must know the place well, right?" Kong Ming'an raised an eyebrow at the awkwardness of the encounter. "What do you want?" "I came to find my fiancée," Shu Tianzhen said as if it were the most natural explanation. Kong Ming'an's interest peaked. After a fraction of a second, he let a little probing mental force slip out and steered the conversation with a softer tone. "Fiancé? My imperial father and grandfather Kong arranged it," she replied breezily. "I haven't even met him yet. I heard he spends all his time in his laboratory. Kind of a strange guy. Well, he looks handsome in the photos." She jabbed a little complaint into her tone. "But he can't just disappear forever, right? I've been sitting here for a month or two, and he still hasn't come out. Isn't the princess just a bargaining chip for marriage?" The thought drifted through Kong Ming'an's mind as he watched the girl's self-satisfied expression. He'd always imagined princesses as either spoiled and capricious or dignified and graceful. This one fit neither mold. He felt something odd stir inside him. Narrowing his eyes, he sent out a thread of mental force, subtle and almost invisible, to steer the conversation. "Don't you resent your imperial father's arrangement?" he asked. Shu Tianzhen answered as if stating a simple truth. "What is there to resent? I'm a princess. If you take the privileges of a princess, you accept the duties too. A princess's duty is to be used in political marriages." "Don't be naive," she continued with a dismissive shrug. "This isn't a storybook. That's just how princesses are." Then, as if aware she'd spoken bluntly, she added, "But I heard you're His Majesty's favorite princess?" Kong Ming'an pressed on. "Favorite?" She gave a short, mocking laugh. "Favorite? If he truly loved me, would he be sending me off to a political marriage? This whole thing was dragging on for years because my father couldn't decide. He kept trying to find some older or younger sister of less talent to betroth instead." She swept her hand as if brushing aside the small grotesqueries of court life. "But a few months ago, after Grandfather Kong came out of seclusion and showed that man my grandfather's 98th level spirit power, Father immediately picked me as the match." "Do you think that's love?" she asked, eyes sharp. Kong Ming'an watched her. She was clearer-headed than she appeared, a practical, unsentimental kind of intelligence. He felt an unexpected interest. "Are you just accepting it? Aren't you worried your husband might be terrible?" "I already said I'm a princess," Shu Tianzhen said, impatient. "This isn't resignation, it's fulfilling my duty. My aunt was like this, my older sisters too. I'll be the same." She spoke with the steady logic of someone used to the rules of her world. "Besides, the man I'm marrying is handsome, and he's Grandfather Kong's grandson. If he misbehaves, I can complain to Grandfather Kong, and getting engaged now gives us time to build feelings. Isn't that better than being forced into a strange marriage as an adult?" Kong Ming'an understood. No romantic fantasies, no rebellious resistance, only practical calculation, a kind of trust in Grandfather Kong's authority, and confidence in the groom's looks. It was rare. He withdrew his mental thread. Almost immediately, confusion flickered across Shu Tianzhen's lively face. She blinked, and realization washed over her like cold water. She had just spoken intimate thoughts to a stranger. Her eyes narrowed, vigilance returning. "You, who are you?" she demanded. She took a half step back, on guard. A possible explanation crossed her mind and made her expression awkward. Kong Ming'an found it amusing. He smiled faintly, removed the mask he'd used for disguise, and met the purple-haired girl's wary gaze. "I'm the fiancé you were just talking about." Shu Tianjin froze. The face was familiar in a way that made her tongue stumble. "Kong Ming'an?" she whispered. "Yes." Her mind raced. "But aren't you always in the lab? I never saw you leave." Then a more inconvenient thought bloomed. He was very, very good-looking. She swallowed, cheeks flushing, and suddenly realized how badly she had let herself speak, calling the Emperor that guy, complaining about marriage duties, boasting she would complain to Grandfather Kong. If any of that spread. Her voice trembled as she begged, Did you remember everything I said?" Kong Ming'an nodded, not hiding anything. "I remembered some." Relief flashed across her face, then fell away when, with casual efficiency, he drew a silver, fingernail-sized metal chip from his pocket and flicked it between his fingers. "Most of it was recorded," he said. "Want me to play it back so you can confirm about the strange guy, the marriage obligations, and— No! Delete it! Delete it now!" Shu Tianzhen snapped. She abandoned every shred of princessly poise and lunged for the chip, desperate. "Please! Delete it! If you delete it, I'll even warm your bed." The words surprised even Kong Ming'an. He stepped back instinctively. His usual composure twitched at the crude intimacy of the offer. Yet she showed no embarrassment, eyes fixed on the chip as if throwing caution to the wind. He paused, then with a swift motion made the metal disc vanish. Watching her expression collapse into a mix of pitifulness and fury, he considered for a heartbeat, then leaned in close to her flushed ear. His voice was low and private, a teasing smile in it. "How could I give it back to you? Your little secret. I'll savor it for a lifetime." Straightening, he smiled once more, turned away, and walked out. He meant to go find his father and ask about the politics behind this betrothal. Left alone, Shu Tianjin's mind whirled. The whisper, "I'll savor it for a lifetime," replayed over and over. She hadn't even married him yet, and already he had leverage on her. This wasn't the neat plan she'd imagined. Manipulate the dull, handsome scholar, let feelings develop, live simply and happily. No, this was a mess. After she married in, wouldn't he bully her every day in 100 devious ways? Her stomach tightened, but one clear thought rose above the chaos. She had to destroy that leverage. Without hesitation, she sprang to her feet and chased after him. 27. Family Tree. In the Kong family mansion, in a garden pavilion, steam rose from porcelain cups on the stone table, but it couldn't disguise the helpless look on Kong Ming'an's face. He set his teacup down and, looking across at his composed elder, let his complaint out plainly. "So, you priced and sold your own grandson without telling me?" Kong Deming sat straight in the main seat, his silver robe immaculate. He sipped his tea with calm and let his gaze drift over the carefully trimmed flowers and trees outside the pavilion. His voice was steady, unruffled. "I told you about it beforehand. It was simply put on hold. Now it's being brought up again, and His Majesty is serious this time, sincere. Besides," he turned his eyes back to Ming'an with a detached, almost clinical understanding. "It seems you don't object either." Ming'an was briefly at a loss. Object? He couldn't honestly say he did. He was simply taken aback by an uncontrollable situation. He furtively glanced to his side. Shu Tianzhen sat primly beside him, or at least pretended to. She acted like an attentive, well-behaved listener to the elders, but her entire focus was on Kong Ming'an. A small hand made the slightest movement toward his pocket, fingers trying with all their caution to hook at something hidden there. The target was obvious, the damned recording chip. She kept her face innocent, but her sparkling purple eyes and the way she puffed out her cheeks betrayed her completely. Ming'an couldn't help a small twitch of a smile. It was an odd feeling. By rights, the girl's behavior was a flagrant breach of personal boundaries, something that ought to irritate him. But she was so direct, almost clumsy, and combined with her image of being an earnest, slightly daft princess and her current, determined mission to steal, it was hard for Ming'an to feel anything but amusement. Perhaps two negatives made a positive, he thought absurdly. Kong Deming noticed the quiet exchange. His eyes flicked, but he made no comment. He returned to the main topic, speaking earnestly. For you, marriage is ultimately an additional safeguard. Your abilities far surpass mine at my age, and among His Majesty's many princes, none are particularly promising. Shu Tianran is acceptable, but his motives are off. He wants control, and he tends to extremes. If Shu Tianran comes to power in the future, and I'm gone, and you remain as complacent as you are now, he will be suspicious. He'll test you until he crosses my bottom line? Ming'an finished for him. So you know your grandson well. Kong Deming inclined his head. If that happens, it might lead to another bloody conflict. Don't shoulder everything alone. Take that position if you think it necessary. My only request is that the emperor after you must be your and Tianzhen's child to preserve the Sun-Moon imperial bloodline. The words landed calmly, but with the weight of a mountain. The air in the pavilion felt suddenly denser. Shu Tianzhen, fingers frozen mid-pick, recoiled as if struck. She hadn't meant to hear any of that. Bloody storm? That position? The bloodline? None of it fitted her simple policy of serve as a marriage pawn, cultivate feelings in advance, secure a powerful backer. Her face stiffened. She darted quick glances around the pavilion and avoided meeting the older men's eyes. She wished she could turn into a pillar or slip into the flagstones, anywhere to be invisible. Ming'an looked at the anxious girl beside him and then to his grandfather with something like helplessness. Kong Deming's expression softened. Satisfaction briefly flickered across his face. It was clear he believed Ming'an did not detest Tianzhen. He changed the subject smoothly, letting the matter rest. With a slight flick of his wrist, he produced an old, thread-bound booklet, its cover stamped with two archaic characters, Kong clan genealogy. All right, since the marriage is settled, we'll leave it at that. He pushed the genealogy across the table to Ming'an. This is what you asked me to investigate over a year ago. I had Zhou Ping's son come back and sort through the family archives. We found something. As you suspected, there's a branch of the family from the Heaven Soul Empire side that has been out of contact for a long time. It's related to a Kong woman who married out many years ago. Ming'an took the book without immediately opening it. And if there are descendants and they're willing, bring them back. If they refuse, don't force them. Kong Deming's face hardened. But if any of their descendants manifest a legacy spirit, either bring them back or kill them. The Sun-Moon legacy spirit cannot exist outside the family. Understood. If I meet someone I can't handle, I'll call you. Kong Deming's brow tightened. There really is one? Yes, at Shrek. The name made Deming frown deeper. Anything else would be straightforward, but Shrek stirred complications and the risk of chain reactions. I'll see if I can pry them away, he said after a pause. Ming'an slipped the genealogy into his storage spirit device, gave his grandfather a reassuring nod, and rose. If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave. Kong Deming sighed. Very well. Handle it yourself. Ming'an bowed and started out. Shu Tianzhen, still trying to remain invisible, froze, then abruptly scrambled to her feet. Grandfather Kong, I'll go as well, she blurted, then almost tiptoed after him. She caught up and reverted to an eager, clingy air, trailing half a step behind Ming'an and occasionally glancing at the pocket that might hold the evidence she was after. Ming'an noticed and found it amusing. He checked his spirit tool communicator to see Meng Hongchen and Xiao Hongchen's status. Both were cultivating. He murmured, "They're cultivating," and dismissed the idea of going to fetch them. Suddenly he halted and turned. Shu Tianzhen almost ran into him, slamming on the brakes. She looked up at him, confused and a little nervous, her purple eyes wide. Ming'an found himself interested by the sight. He bent slightly, meeting her gaze levelly. "Is it very boring always staying in the palace?" he asked. "Huh?" Tianzhen froze, then answered on reflex. "Not really, it's okay." A small smile touched Ming'an's mouth. "Then, would you like to go out for a walk?" Shu Tianzhen blinked once. "Ah?" Chapter 28, Mingmeng Chamber of Commerce, Shrek City. Top floor of the Mingmeng Commerce headquarters, President's office. The room was quiet and elegant, filled with the faint smell of books and an expensive spice. Suddenly, the space rippled like water, and a gray door, radiating an odd calm, appeared out of nowhere and silently swung open. Kong Ming'an stepped through, his expression as composed as ever. Close behind him, Shu Tianzhen cautiously peered out, her eyes bright with tentative curiosity. As she glanced around the office, so different from the Sun Moon Empire's style, she turned and stared at the slowly vanishing gray door, clearly stunned. Weren't we in Mingdu a moment ago? Is this really Shrek City?" Her voice betrayed her disbelief. The idea of instantaneous thousand-mile travel was far beyond what she had expected. "See for yourself," Kong Ming'an said casually, gesturing toward the large floor-to-ceiling window. Shu Tianzhen moved forward and looked down. The streets below had an older, more solid feel than Mingdu's metallic sheen and Seoul engineer brilliance. The thoroughfares bustled with life. Students in Shrek uniforms streamed in and out of the buildings beneath, each face reflecting the ordinary variety of daily expression. Once again, she was nearly dazed. No, she really had arrived in Shrek City. In her understanding, even a titled Duluo couldn't casually transport someone so far, and they had come directly from Mingdu to Shrek City. If it wasn't a person teleporting, but a fixed-point device created by a Level 9 Soul engineer, given how easily she had crossed over, it would probably be straightforward to use. What if they'd been sent to the Sun Moon Imperial Palace instead? Her face clouded with a more serious thought. The more she considered it, the more questions pushed against her composure. How? How is this done? It's just a simple use of space, Kong Ming'an answered calmly. The truth was not complicated. They had used the undead demigod plane as a transit hub. From Mingdu, they entered that plane. A preset device triggered a door-opening mechanism on the Shrek City end, and they stepped straight through. The method consumed little energy, was effectively unlimited in range, and was exceptionally stable. Its only real drawbacks were the slow startup and cooldown times, which made it unsuitable for combat. It had been developed by Iliex after Kong Ming'an provided the idea and he ran a few tests. Practical and useful, deceptively simple if one ignored its strategic implications. Shu Tianzhen looked at him with a mix of awe and private annoyance. So simple, she thought, and with that simplicity he could change the whole Doluo continent. She pressed her lips together and let the thought go. She knew her limits. The more she knew, the more complications arose. There was still no real trust between her and her fiancé. It was wiser to treat this as nothing more than a sightseeing trip. She stood by the window, eyes bright as she quietly took in the view. Kong Ming'an did not press her. He went to the desk and pressed an unobtrusive button. Moments later, a soft knock sounded at the office door, and it opened. A woman entered in a tailored black work uniform that emphasized her graceful figure. At first, she seemed a little cold. Her chestnut hair was neatly tied back, and half-rimmed glasses sat on her nose. Behind them, her eyes were intelligent and composed. But when she saw Kong Ming'an, that cool demeanor melted into a warm, almost sisterly smile. "President, you're back." Her voice was pleasant and respectful. "Kek, Juzi." Kong Ming'an nodded. Su Tianzhen turned immediately, instinctively straightening and narrowing her eyes as if to appraise something. Her gaze flicked subtly between Juzi and Kong Ming'an. Kong Ming'an glanced over and introduced, "This is Juzi, Vice President of Mingmeng Commerce. She handles our operations throughout the Three Kingdoms. Miss Juzi, this is Tianzhen. She's accompanying me on a visit to Shrek City." His tone was flat and businesslike. Kong Ming'an had been running a talent recruitment plan for some time, scouting people from the original world who showed promise or unique abilities. Juzi had stood out among the candidates when he was assembling Mingmeng's core executives. Winning her loyalty had been remarkably simple. He promised to help her take revenge on the White Tiger Duke of the Star Luo Empire and gave her an identity that proved he could deliver. That was enough to secure her devotion. Juzi, perceptive and composed, noticed Shu Tianzhen's appraisal and without hesitation adjusted her glasses, smiled politely, and inclined her head. Without delay, she turned to Kong Ming'an, the professional mask slipping back on. "President, what would you like me to report?" "Proceed as usual." He sat and adopted a business posture. Juzi nodded and began her briefing. "President, the commerce has been performing very well. Last month, net profits rose 35% over the same period last year. This is mainly due to the rare Soul Engineer materials and precision components we've been transporting through the transit station, which are currently in short supply in the Three Kingdoms market. At the same time, Mining operations on several rare mineral veins across the three kingdoms continue to progress. With the transit station facilitating transfers, our resource movements remain completely concealed from the local authorities. Additionally, under the Enlightenment Project, we've funded 17 new civilian talents this quarter, spirit masters and soul engineers, and all have signed agreements. Our infiltration of Shrek Academy is on schedule. 3 insiders have already entered the core disciple circle. Regarding recruitment of Shrek graduates, we've recently persuaded 1 level 5 soul engineer and 2 spirit emperors to join the commerce. Our intelligence indicates interest from Shrek alumni in joining Ming'an has noticeably increased. In Shrek's Outer Court Spirit Department, 5 teachers have established cooperative relationships with us, selling admission quotas. The evidence has been sealed and can be accessed when required. We've also established the headquarters of Ming'an Daily and covertly control or support 3 small newspaper outfits with different angles, creating an initial communications network. Following your instructions, while we report ordinary news and gossip from various countries each day, we also intersperse a few confirmed negative stories about Shrek Academy, items like teacher monopolies, student bullying, unfair task assignments, internal factional infighting, and so on. Among the lower ranks, some dissenting voices have already begun to appear. Juzi's report was steady, precise, as if she were reciting a script she'd delivered a dozen times before. Kong Ming'an listened without interruption, his face revealing nothing, while Shu Tianzhen stood by the window, watching the city below and listening, the subtle tension between curiosity and restraint written across her features. 29. Shrek Collapse Plan. Listening to Sister Juzi's report, Kong Ming'an nodded slightly, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. All of his moves in the Duluo Three Kingdoms ultimately boiled down to 5 things: economic infiltration, resource extraction, talent acquisition, structural subversion, and control of public opinion. A war between the Sun Moon Empire and the Duluo Three Kingdoms was inevitable, and he would inevitably side with the Sun Moon Empire. So his many schemes against the Duluo Three Kingdoms were not scattershot, they were calculated. Establishing a newspaper agency was not just to smear Shrek. Its real purpose was to build a vast intelligence network across the Duluo Three Kingdoms and to subtly shape public opinion. With the ultra-high-speed information network that used Iliex's undead demiplane as a relay, the papers under the Ming'an banner always got the news first, giving them an absolute edge in timeliness and enabling them to dominate the market. Likewise, the Enlightenment plan and recruitment of Shrek graduates weren't mere philanthropy. Though he personally distrusted Shrek, he could not pretend their talent didn't exist. Poaching them, or at least recruiting them to serve as outward-facing figures for his business association, would provide an operational shell inside the Three Kingdoms. Shu Tianzhen, standing nearby, was speechless. She stared at the young man, about her age, as Sister Juzi unfolded the plots of infiltration, talent capture, intelligence, and opinion manipulation. She had thought Kong Ming'an was nothing but a lab rat, dull and easy to influence. Who said he was easy to manipulate? She remembered Kong Deming's remark that he can be replaced and had been skeptical. Now she felt a deep, inarticulate agreement. When Sister Juzi finished her orderly briefing, Kong Ming'an asked, "What about the thing I had you look into?" Sister Juzi produced a thin file from her spirit tool. It's been verified. Zhang Lexuan, 18 years old, spirit power rank 68. Her spirit is Moon, very powerful. She's the captain of this generation's Shrek 7 Devils and holds high status in the academy. As for her background, Shu Tianzhen, who had been listening with rapt attention, cut in. Her eyes widened. Moon spirit? Kong Ming'an had expected her reaction. Yes, the branch family I mentioned to grandfather earlier, that's the one. Understanding dawned on Shu Tianzhen's face. She said nothing more, but her gaze sharpened. Kong Ming'an turned back to Sister Juzi. How effective was the rumor campaign I asked you to run? The effect exceeded expectations, Sister Juzi said calmly. We planted vague fragments, phrases like Sun Moon Empire Kong family, Silver Moon spirit, and Imperial family legacy, in places where she might see them. She became suspicious and started investigating her past. She even commissioned our business association to help. And the negative stories about Shrek? distributed as well. Sister Juzi slid another document toward Kong Ming'an. These negative reports are all true, no exaggeration. We arranged for her to discover them during her search. She seems more troubled by Shrek's alleged corruption than by questions about her family. Even if something is only a possibility, she'll dig for proof. And if she digs, our people will place the evidence in her hands at the right time. According to information from Shrek's internal sources, some senior masters in the Sea God Pavilion complain she has a tendency to lynch without trial. Very good. Kong Ming'an's tone was honest praise. Sister Juzi, well done. Sister Juzi's lips curved in a faint, almost imperceptible smile. She bowed with the same respect she always showed. It is my duty, Chairman, the report concluded. Sister Juzi excused herself and left the office with deliberate composure. Before she left, she bowed slightly to Shu Tianjin and departed. The door closed. Shu Tianjin finally let her curiosity loose. So Zhang Lexuan is the target? Only part of it. Kong Ming'an's expression was cool. She's important. She has the moon spirit, but she's not the whole plan. Wouldn't it be simpler to just kill her, like grandfather suggested? That would be quicker. Am I that bloodthirsty? Kong Ming'an gave her a mildly reproving look. She's of the moon spirit. By our family tree, she could be considered a clan sister. There's no need to kill her. Besides, she isn't difficult to win over. It will take time, but it will be more useful, and perhaps more interesting, to have her unravel Shrek from the inside. He smiled, a benign expression that never reached his eyes. Shrek Academy looked grand from the outside, but was hollow within. Its foundation rotted, internal conflicts plentiful, and its top-tier combat power lacking. Kong Ming'an intended to plant a few more moles inside that decay, accelerate the collapse from within, and wait for the moment to deal the killing blow. He had plans even targeting Ming'an, the head of the Sea God Pavilion, but the current imbalance of forces made a direct confrontation too costly. Slow, internal disassembly was far safer and would feed his own rise as he harvested the spoils. Shu Tianjin understood a little and then forced herself not to pry. Some things were healthier to remain only partly known. Wanting to live a long life, she mouthed her personal maxim and felt someone take her hand. She looked up to see Kong Ming'an smiling. I promised to show you around Shrek City. I wouldn't break my promise. Her fiancé? For a moment she was stunned, then brightened. Let's go. She pulled him along. Shrek Academy, Inner Court. In the mimicry training room, a girl of about 17 or 18 sat cross-legged, cultivating quietly. Moonlight poured over her pale, translucent skin, lending a cool serenity to the small room. Her features were delicate and composed. She looked like someone carved from moonlight itself. She'd been meditating when the door opened from the outside and a voice called in. Sister Lexuan, your confinement is over. 30. Zhang Lexuan's hesitation. Two women emerged from the cultivation room. One had a quick temper like a flare of flame. The other was gentle as water. They were Zhang Lexuan's two close friends, Wu Ming, the Golden Crow Holy Maiden, and Han Ruoro, the Golden Fairy. Lexuan, time's up. Han Ruoro spoke softly, a trace of reluctance in her voice. The halo around Zhang Lexuan faded, her long lashes fluttered, and she opened her eyes. A month of seclusion had raised her cultivation to rank 69, but there was no joy of a breakthrough in her gaze, no relief at the end of isolation, only a heavy, unyielding weariness. She rose quietly, nodded briefly to her friends, and walked out. Wu Ming quickened her pace to catch up, indignation in her tone. Sister Lexuan, I'm telling you, you did nothing wrong. That scoundrel used his father's status as an elder to get away with so much. He forced hard-working students into death. What he did was monstrous. You killed him and rid people of a scourge. Han Ruoro took Zhang Lexuan's arm and squeezed gently. That's right, Lexuan. Don't take it to heart. The dean and the elders may have sent you into seclusion, but everyone knows you were right. Zhang Lexuan stopped walking but said nothing. Right? Wrong? Her thoughts roiled. Her family had been destroyed by corrupt spirit masters. That trauma had made her cling even more to Shrek when Elder Mu adopted her. She had treated Shrek as home, where she could cultivate in peace, where she made friends like Ruoro and Wu Ming, where she had a few simple, happy years. Shrek had once been a symbol of light and justice to her. About a year ago, things had begun to change. Small clues about her past led her to dig deeper, and she uncovered shadows beneath Shrek's glory that she had never noticed. Instructors embezzling student funds, senior students bullying juniors, and other unsavory deeds. She had trusted the Academy's justice at first. Every time she reported something, there was a momentary punishment, and she allowed herself to hope. But the punishments often proved superficial. Those people resurfaced in different roles, sometimes even promoted. When she protested to the higher-ups, she was told to consider the bigger picture. She reported a logistics director for embezzling student resources. The director was lightly reprimanded, and only after she went directly to Elder Mu was the matter handled properly. She thought it was an isolated incident then, but similar cases kept happening and getting worse. Finally, she uncovered a teacher in charge of logistics procurement who had long exploited students on work-study programs. The man's abuse drove several students to end their lives. She collected evidence and reported him. When the enforcement team took him away, she felt justice had been served. Then she received a notification from Ming'an Commerce to pick up a spirit tool she'd ordered for auxiliary cultivation and to check on information about the moon spirit they'd been asked to inquire about. At the entrance of the most luxurious restaurant near the Commerce, she saw the teacher, arm in arm with someone, laughing, his face flushed with pleasure, no remorse. She followed him, hid in a private room, and listened as he boasted, drunken and arrogant. "A few days in detention is nothing. My old man is an elder. Who in Shrek would dare touch me? Those weaklings were too soft. They deserve to die. The money we saved will last us a year or two of living well." Everything inside her burst. She confronted him. He only hurled insults and sneered that he'd be out soon. She couldn't restrain herself, and the confrontation escalated. In the end, amid his curses and contempt, she lost control, and then came the Academy's judgment. Dean Yan Shaoe suppressed the incident instead of reporting it, and many elders, especially the teacher's father, were furious at her acting first and reporting later, calling it disrespectful. Her merits and demerits balanced out, but she was forced into seclusion for reflection. She still didn't understand how high elders could ignore their own kin's crimes, how they would sacrifice basic justice for the sake of face and stability. Shrek, the place she would have given everything for, suddenly felt strange and cold. She forced down the rising emotions, managed a brittle smile, and said, "I'm fine. It's been a month. My spirit tool at Ming'an Commerce should be ready. I'll go pick it up." Wu Ming and Han Ruoro exchanged looks and fell into step behind her. In Shrek City, Ming'an Commerce had created a new trend. Civilian spirit tools, convenient, practical devices, had started to spread among ordinary people and some spirit masters. Shrek Academy, bound by tradition and the spirit department's philosophy, hadn't officially adopted them. Rumors said the Academy's spirit tool department couldn't replicate the core components of these items, so they were slow to respond. Still, the novelty drew many young students who bought privately. The Commerce's entrance bustled with people. As Zhang Lexuan walked in, her eyes swept the crowd and lingered on a figure a little too long. Not far away stood a young man, not very old, but unnaturally handsome, calm and composed in a way that didn't fit with the crowd. Beside him, a short-haired girl with pale purple hair held his arm and jabbered, completely engrossed. The unusual pairing and the stranger's inexplicable aura made Zhang Lexuan look again. Wu Ming followed her gaze and brightened. She nudged Zhang Lexuan playfully. "Wow, what a handsome guy! Sister Lexuan, is this your type?" Zhang Lexuan flushed and denied it quickly. "Don't be ridiculous. He just looked different." Wu Ming laughed, unconvinced, taking another look. "He is different. So young, taking little girls out. Too bad he's too young. If he weren't, I might have made a move." Zhang Lexuan gave her a helpless look. Wu Ming talked a big game but kept her distance from other students, mostly bluster. Zhang Lexuan stole one more glance in that direction, then pushed the odd feeling down and followed her friends into the busy Commerce. At the other end of the shop, Kong Ming'an, who'd been badgered by Shu Tianjin with questions, sensed something. His gaze drifted toward the entrance, then retracted slowly. Could they all be poached? The thought amused him. Indeed, poaching was a slippery slope. From zero to many, it could become addictive. 31. Classic jokester. After spending a day with Su Tianzhen in Shrek City, the two returned to Mingdu that evening via the undead demigod plane. Her Highness the Princess had enjoyed herself thoroughly. Even her purple eyes seemed to shine brighter, making her oddly beautiful. Yet, somewhat to his surprise, Su Tianzhen didn't ask Kong Ming'an to take her out again. She was carefree and a little flighty, but always maintained a proper decorum. Honestly, it was hard to hold any ill will toward someone like her. After seeing Su Tianzhen off, Kong Ming'an set about drafting schedules for the coming tasks, and his days soon settled into a steady rhythm. Most of his time was spent in the lab with Iliex, studying the nature of spirit rings, exploring new applications, and continuously optimizing his own rings. Research on spirit rings would be a major focus for the foreseeable future. He also made regular visits to the military camp to monitor the newest soldiers' training under the improved body tempering method, and to the Hall of Worship to collect training samples from those Rank 9 soul engineers practicing the ring tempering method. Both programs were long-term projects requiring repeated data refinement, patience, and a large number of samples. His days were, in short, busier than ever. A few months later, while being driven to the military camp on the outskirts of Mingdu in a soul engineer vehicle, Kong Ming'an sat quietly in the back. Starry Sky Dolo Yeyulin was at the wheel. Compared to a few months earlier, Yeyulin's aura was markedly deeper. He had clearly broken through, his spirit power now ranked 95, placing him among the top fighters. That a newly advanced rank 95 powerhouse served as a personal guard and driver spoke volumes about how important the Sun-Moon Empire considered the passenger. Kong Ming'an watched the scenery pass and let his thoughts wander over recent events. Xiao Hongqian and Meng Hongqian had made astonishing progress. Before 10 years old, both had already secured their third spirit ring, each worth over 6,000 years. They truly matched their fabled potential as spirit kings by 15, terrifyingly talented. And the princess had somehow slid effortlessly into their circle, getting along especially well with Meng Hongqian. They often clustered together, whispering and throwing him inscrutable looks. The way Miss Meng and Her Highness interacted was nothing like he expected. Girls' minds were even harder to read than spirit ring parameters. Meanwhile, in the imperial court, Shu Tianran had been officially named Crown Prince several months prior. But less than 2 months after his appointment, a carefully orchestrated assassination attempt nearly ended him. Without the appearance of Juzi from the original story, Shu Tianran's fate was even harsher. His legs were shattered, his left side devastated by violent spirit power. Imperial physicians saved his life, but his left arm couldn't be saved. According to reports, 4 of his 5 limbs were lost. Yet astonishingly, he did not sink into despair. He endured his crippled body and insisted on handling state affairs. The emperor praised him and launched a desperate search for heaven and earth treasure to cure him. On the surface, at least, his position as crown prince seemed more secure than ever. And then, screech. The soul engineer vehicle braked hard, fishtailing as it came to a sideways stop on the road. Kong Ming'an's thoughts snapped off. He looked up and saw a hulking figure, like an iron tower, suddenly blocking the road ahead. He wanted to know what was happening, but the next instant, a suffocating pressure rolled off that figure, an absolute killing intent that locked onto him and nearly sealed off the surrounding space. Yeyulin's expression hardened. He moved in a flash, stepping in front of Kong Ming'an. 9 spirit rings flared around him. 7 of them shattered in rapid succession, and his aura exploded upward. "Young master, get down! It's a super Duluo!" Yeyulin shouted, planting himself to absorb the assault. Kong Ming'an's pupils tightened. He reflexively opened the portal to the undead demigod plane behind him to escape, but before he could step through, rip! The void was torn open at his side by an impossibly pure force. Another figure lunged like Guimei, palm transformed into a claw, snapping toward the back of his head. A second attacker. A rank 98 Super Duluo restrained Yeyulin, who had only just reached Super Doluo, and simultaneously, a limit Duluo struck at Kong Ming'an, whose spirit power hadn't even reached rank 20. This wasn't merely the strong preying on the weak, it was shameless. Kong Ming'an had no time to resent the unfairness. In the instant before the second attacker's strike landed, The eye of life on his brow seemed to sense the danger and sprang open, releasing a blinding jade gold light. A vast life aura, laced with a solemn, sacred power, poured out and instantly wove an extraordinarily resilient life shield around him. At the same time, the modest silver bracelet on his wrist reacted, unfolding layers of silver, moon-shaped barriers that enveloped him, isolating everything inside from the outside. Buzz, boom! The attacker's palm slammed into the combined defense of jade gold light and silver moons. A terrifying energy rippled out. The Soul Engineer vehicle disintegrated, the ground buckled and cratered, and spiderweb cracks spread everywhere. The jade gold life shield trembled, and half the layered silver moon barriers shattered. But Kong Ming'an remained utterly untouched. A full-strength limit duo strike had been completely blocked. Daming, the second attacker, frowned, a rising sense of absurdity burning in him. Even under plain suppression, as a divine official, he couldn't use divine rank power, only limit duo level. Otherwise, the plane would target him. And this had been a full-force limit blow. He was certain that, outside of the very top few on the Vicious Beast list, no one on the entire Duoluo plane could stop it. Yet his sneak attack had been foiled by a kid whose spirit power wasn't even at the Spirit Grandmaster level, using what appeared to be only 2 external items? Preposterous. What on earth was Tang San asking him to kill? Tang San, you. In Daming's original plan, the crucial point of the assassination wasn't the killing itself, but the escape afterward. They had even arranged to use the many spatial rifts around the Heaven and Earth Asking Love Valley, not far from here, to leave the Duoluo plane directly. But now, the operation was stuck at the very step of killing the target. There was no time to think. A cold glint flashed in Daming's eyes as he prepared to press the attack and break through the defenses before him. Just as he moved, though, the young man at the center of the group calmly took 4 more silver bracelets from his storage spirit ring, 2 for each wrist, and slipped them on. Daming froze. More? The air went silent for a moment. The two stared at each other. The youth showed no panic, only an unnervingly mature calm. A hint of mischief played at the corner of his mouth as he chuckled softly. So, you were sent by Tang San? Daming's pupils tightened. He instinctively felt something was wrong. They'd been exposed. How? He had said nothing from the moment he struck. Only seconds had passed, and yet some weakness had been revealed. Confused but out of time to hesitate, he condensed spirit power and lashed out with another palm. Boom! Light rushed from above and below. A heavy, solemn silence and a holy radiance fell at once. A gray shaft of light descended from the sky and formed a gray phantom before Kong Ming'an. The phantom held a gray staff, 9 eerie gray spirit rings turning slowly, and a vast torrent of spirit power, laden with soul power nearly on par with the divine rank, crashed down, locking on Daming and blanketing the area in a domain woven of light and death. Iliex had arrived on the battlefield. "Are you all right, Ming'an?" Iliex called. "I'm fine, old Iliex. Just a bit startled," Kong Ming'an replied calmly. Kong Ming'an tried to open the gate to the undead demiplane, only to find the space sealed. Long-distance teleportation was impossible. On the other side, Ye Yulin had already engaged Ming. How could someone freshly advanced to Super Duo match Ming? Ye Yulin struck at full strength, but Ming simply punched out. Raw force shattered countless starlight, sending Ye Yulin flying and coughing up blood. Ming thumped his chest. The phantom of the Titan giant ape rose behind him. With a sneer, his massive palm shot toward Kong Ming'an and Iliex. "Get lost." A roar like thunder cracked through the sky. A silver stream of light tore down, and a figure plummeted like a meteor to land behind Kong Ming'an. Kong Deming had arrived. Without hesitation, Kong Deming's sun spirit manifested behind him. 7 spirit rings, each over 90,000 years old, flared into being one after another, pouring unparalleled, violent energy into his body. His aura surged and expanded. He switched spirits to Silver Moon. 9 spirit rings spun into place, restraining and channeling the nearly overwhelming energy. Kong Deming tore off his research robe, revealing an incredibly muscular physique, and with no spirit tool at all, threw a single punch. Silver moonlight and vital chi braided across his fist and struck straight at Ming's incoming palm. Dong! The blow landed squarely on Ming's giant hand. A burst of force erupted. Erming's tower-like body staggered backward. The punch combined twin spirit fury and the ultimate physical strength of a body cultivator. Both rank 98 in spirit power, and it left Erming staring in disbelief. How could a spirit beast, a titan giant ape famed for brute strength, be outclassed by Kong Deming, who, by all gathered information, was merely a civilian researcher despite his high spirit rank? Something foul was afoot. Kong Deming stood calm beside Kong Ming'an, silver hair whipping, muscles taut, vital chi roaring like a furnace inside him. Faint steam rose from his pores, scorching the air. His gaze swept over Deming and Erming like lightning. "Ming'an," he said. "I'm fine," Kong Ming'an answered, equally composed. Did they really think he hadn't expected an assassination? The moment Iliak's had coincidentally arrived by his side in that almost eerie fashion, he had known he'd been set up. For his own safety, he had spent his time not only on his personal improvement, but on strengthening the two strongest supporters he could find. It would take him 7 or 8 years to reach the level needed to handle such threats alone. For Iliax and Kong Deming, who already had firm foundations, 1 or 2 years of focused growth would be enough. The present situation proved those preparations wise, and, in some ways, better than he had hoped. In the worst-case scenario he had imagined, Shrek Academy's titled Duluo and the Clear Sky Sect's titled Duluo would all swarm him, along with the many 100,000-year sea spirit beasts who revered the sea god. The current scene wasn't far off that. The two men before him were, in effect, as fearsome as divine beasts. "Grandpa, old Iliax," Kong Ming'an said slowly. Kong Deming understood at once and glanced toward Iliax. "This one is mine," he said. "Then this one will be entrusted to me," Iliax replied quietly. The two ancient masters, who had never met before and were now cooperating for the first time, displayed an almost uncanny rapport. Their auras shifted in unison and then surged with a speed that defied logic. Deming's face went white. Before his eyes, the energy of heaven and earth poured siphon-like into the bodies of the two elders. This was not the work of some special spirit ability or cultivation technique. It was the plain will intervening. Only then did Da Ming fully understand the true identity of the target they'd been sent to kill, the young man at the very back who'd shown nothing remarkable except for his looks. He looked calm because he was protected. He wasn't just anyone. He was a son of luck. He was really a son of luck. Tang San had actually dared send them to kill a son of luck? Deming's face hardened. He now knew they'd been set up by that bastard Tang San, but there was no more hesitation. He took up a fighting stance. "Second brother," he shouted. "Understood." Erming roared back, and a terrifying aura, far greater than anything they'd shown so far, erupted from both of them. Though still held within the limits of Limit Dulo, the quality of their power had changed. Deming understood the stakes clearly. If they fled now without killing the Son of Luck, the Plain Will would target them comprehensively, and they would be doomed with no chance of survival. Only by trying to kill the Son of Luck, by wounding the Plain Will, or at least delaying it, could they hope to win the time needed to escape. The odds were slim, but it was their only option. They had no choice. The battlefield was effectively split in two. Da Ming struck first at Iliax, lightning crackling between his hands as his slowing domain dropped over the field and yanked Iliax into its range. Inside the slowing domain, space and time seemed to stagnate, movement grew painfully slow, and even the flow of spirit power almost stopped. The domain master, however, was unaffected. Da Ming's fists opened and closed. His spirit power, condensed into a tangible force, poured into his blows like a mountain, trying to crush Iliax outright. Even under the plane's suppression, he could only exert Limit Dulo level strength, but Da Ming had once been a God Realm God official. His rank transformation gave him unmatched control over his power, and in the few times he'd acted over the past 10,000 years, it had made him decisive. Now he attacked with absolute confidence. Then Iliax moved within the slowing domain. 9 gray spirit rings flared at once, and the soul skill modules etched into them all activated. The spell cultivator revealed itself. No chanting, no preparation, just thought. Countless 9th rank magic spells, adapted by him to the laws of the Duluo world, erupted instantly. Necrotic Sky Curtain unfurled a dozen times to blanket the area. Eternal Ice Coffin sealed 9 targets at once. Great Light Divine Judgment was stacked and released 36 times for a series of detonations. There was no channeling, no pause. Ninth-rank spells poured forth continuously, as if without cost. The slowing domain was terrifyingly powerful. Pushed to its extreme, it could make the world seem to stop. But Deming couldn't do that. The area effects, the single-target locks, the stacked explosions, all of it slowed in his perception, but even slowed, he could not avoid them. High-level spells of utterly opposed attributes poured down on him like a storm, overwhelming the domain and rending his body. Shock flashed across Daming's face. This level of assault went far beyond Limit Dulo. He was only holding on with his body and a sliver of divine force foundation. What was this? Any other Limit Dulo would have exhausted their spirit power, yet the attacker's spirit power seemed inexhaustible, showing no sign of strain while casting abilities of this magnitude. On the other flank, Ming had his own domain. The gravity domain slammed down, pinning Kong Deming in place. A bright, earthy yellow light flared from Ming, his spirit power amplified, and he hurled a punch meant to shatter mountains and split the earth. Kong Deming met it without a flicker of fear. As the foremost achiever of the body cultivator path, his chi and blood roared like a dragon. Silver radiance wrapped his frame. His swollen muscles gleamed like cast platinum. He didn't dodge. He met fist with fist, foot with foot. Boom. Thunderous roars echoed as raw physical force tore deep, terrible chasms into the ground. Horror crossed Ming's face. He realized he was being suppressed in the area where he was strongest, and while his opponent stood inside his gravity domain, he was a Titan giant ape. Even with his spirit power limited to 98 by the plane's suppression, the same as his foe, he was being forced back. But Kong Deming didn't let him ponder the injustice. With his right hand, he summoned the Silver Moon Divine Light Hood, his natal spirit tool, nearly fused to his Silver Moon spirit. He didn't use it defensively. He yanked it as one might pluck the moon from the sky, shrank it into a miniature silver orb, and brought it down like a warhammer, cold and destructive. Rumble. Vast spirit power, physical strength magnified by chi and blood, and the force of a spirit tool layered into a single strike. Ming's chi and blood surged. He staggered, raising his arms instinctively, and felt his bones splinter, fingers cracking inch by inch as blood spurted out. Is this a scholar? Who said soul engineers were physically weak and bad at close combat? Both Daming and Ming found themselves cornered and thoroughly suppressed, sensing genuine mortal danger. If this continued, they would die. Deming's expression went stark. He had hoped there might still be a way out, but now survival seemed impossible. He could clearly feel at least 3 more auras, each at least at limit rank, locking onto this position, and 2 of them were closing fast. There was no time left. A decisive look sparked in his eyes. He roared, "Second brother, unseal the seal!" Roar! Ming returned the shout. Almost at once, something within both of them shattered. A seal snapped. Though they still tried to keep their rank suppressed, a trace of true god-official essence burst free. Divine force that Tang San had implanted in them when he once extracted his divine thought from their minds and tested them. It was small. Tang San had repeatedly erased its aura to hide its origin, so the divine force never reached second-rank divinity, and under the plane's suppression, its rank was even lower. But it was enough. Blue-gold divine light roared up like a tsunami. Phantasms of their true forms flickered into being behind them, their auras leaping, swelling, and intensifying. The 2 struck at once, and the suppression that had pinned them was finally cracked. Light of their punches burst out, forcing Iliex and Kong Deming back a few steps, just enough to open a gap for Kong Ming'an, who cowered behind them. They bought themselves 3 breaths. They had no choice. The Dulo plane did not allow divinities, and the God Realm held a monitoring mechanism. The God Realm core watched all planes and would send a guiding divine light if someone achieved divinity. Spirit beasts were forbidden from attaining divinity, and these 2 had been sent to the lower realm in a manner that could almost be called smuggling by a flawless God King. If the God Realm discovered them, annihilation would be certain. There was no retreat. Their plan was simple and desperate. 1 breath to shove the enemy back, 1 breath to try to kill the target and draw the suppressing attention, and the last breath to bolt and escape, using the burst of divine force. Ming and Ming were clear-headed. Their chance to kill was far from certain, but they could at least distract the two overpowering enemies and flee. They launched themselves recklessly, all-out attacks laced with the lingering divine force, tearing through space and materializing a few meters from Ming'an in an instant. Iliex and Ming counterattacked at the same time. The sacred protective light and Ming's silver moon-tinted chi arrived first, meeting the incoming strikes head-on, just as Ming and Ming's assaults were about to collide and annihilate a short distance from Ming'an. Everything froze. It was as if an invisible hand pressed pause on the world. Raging divine force, flying dust, bursting energy, Ming and Ming already turning to flee, the defenses about to shield Ming'an. Everything solidified. Only thought could move. All eyes snapped to the figure who had silently appeared at the center of the frozen battlefield, cloaked in purple. No one needed to guess. It was a divinity. At that moment, the god of destruction had descended upon Doluo. The purple-robed figure walked slowly toward Ming'an and, with an almost casual wave, erased the blow that had a slim chance of killing him. He wasn't some sadist who enjoyed tormenting promising talent. He simply wanted to be thorough and prevent accidents. At the same time, the restrictions binding Ming'an were withdrawn. Within the silent world, Ming'an became the second presence free to move. He looked up without thinking and met a pair of eyes that contained the very image of destruction, watching him with keen interest. "Boy, are you not afraid of death?" The voice was majestic, threaded with curiosity. Any mortal facing a divinity should be trembling, but Ming'an relaxed slightly when he took in the god of destruction's bearing. "How could I not be afraid of death?" he said. "I'm terrified of it. There's so much I haven't done. Dying now would be a waste. And yet you do not seem to be struggling?" The god of destruction prompted. "I just accept defeat," Ming'an replied calmly. "I did everything I could. I triggered automated defenses against a limit duo. I arranged for 2 top-tier powerhouses who could appear instantly. I set preemptive contingencies, planned as many scenarios as I could, and designed responses for each. If I went to all that trouble and still can't escape death, then it means I lost the gamble. I accept that." A faint ripple of feeling passed through the god of destruction's eyes. Respect. Ever since his own god position stabilized, and his consort, the goddess of life, had likewise settled, he had called his 7 sins, 7 first-ranked divinities, to examine the field. Their verdict had been nearly unanimous. God position successor found. This young man, standing now, showed exceptional compatibility with every god position. It was unprecedented. From the moment the god of destruction noticed him, he had kept an eye on the youth. He had been prepared to step in earlier, only to discover the boy had layered defenses, spirit tools, and 2 powerful protectors. Those surprises had forced him to act after all. Now he narrowed his eyes, his tone adopting that of a teacher testing a pupil. "I don't believe you left no contingencies." Ming'an blinked, relaxed even further, and answered without hesitation. "I split off some of my remnant souls prematurely and filled them with my knowledge. In a state similar to Elder Yi, they'll use the undead demiplane as a springboard. The moment I die, they'll leave the Duluo plane. Their core logic will be revenge. They'll grow by any means necessary until they become first-ranked divinities or even god kings, and then go on suicidal vengeance missions against the targets I preset. They won't stop until they die." The god of destruction watched him quietly as the young man calmly outlined his almost grandiose revenge plan. His lips twitched in a way he didn't quite notice. If he could not live, he would make sure others could not live either. The old god was silent for a long moment, then said without much feeling, "This old man thinks you're a bit extreme." "It's all right." Ming'an smiled a little, as if conceding a quirk he had no intention of correcting. The god of destruction's eyes betrayed a hint of amusement. This was a promising seed for destruction. He changed tack. "I am the god of destruction, one of the 5 god kings of the god realm," he said. "Your heart nature, your intelligence, and this determination to drag everyone down with you fit this god position well. Will you accept my legacy? If you agree, I will administer a god examination. Pass it, and you can inherit the god king position of destruction." Ming'an fell silent, the offer was far beyond what he had expected and seductive. The God King position of destruction, one of the 5 God King offices in the God realm, would be immensely powerful. Inheriting it would propel him to a new height. Yet he was conflicted. He knew himself well enough to see a mismatch. He was not ruthless by nature. Unless absolutely necessary, he avoided actions that would condemn others. His father would say he was too soft. That temperament didn't mesh perfectly with the God of Destruction's domain. But beyond heart, nature, and wisdom, there was his spirit, his energy spirit, which allowed him to control all energy that belonged to him. The destructive power tied to the God of Destruction could well be a form of energy, meaning he might be uniquely compatible. By the same logic, that compatibility explained why he had been suitable for other God positions too. Kong Ming'an considered that possibility an interesting thought forming. He did not accept or decline the offer immediately. Instead, he asked tentatively, "Your Excellency Destruction, may I say a few words?" "Speak," the god said, cool and indifferent. He had already decided to claim the youth that day. If the boy refused, he would drag Little Green into it and offer a second legacy, dual God-King positions. The God realm allowed holders of multiple God positions, provided compatibility was high. If this young man was as compatible as he seemed, then 2 positions could be controlled, and possibly something remarkable could be forged. Kong Ming'an began, "For certain reasons, I know things about the God realm, and I have some understanding of you." The god's face stayed impassive. He had seen transmigrators and rebirths before. Knowing some things about the God realm didn't faze him. "I heard from unofficial sources," Kong Ming'an continued, "that you and the goddess of life have been married for many years but never had children. The reason, apparently, is that you are impotent. Boy, do you know what you're saying?" The god of destruction frowned, a flash of anger knitting his brow. Kong Ming'an remained unhurried. "But I might be able to cure it." The god sucked in his breath, suddenly serious. "Elaborate." "The principle is actually very simple. It's known that Your Excellency, the god of destruction, because of your power of destruction, does not possess life. Furthermore, since you and the goddess of life are both god kings and share equal power, even the goddess of life cannot neutralize your power of destruction. At best, you can mutually annihilate one another. Under such mutual annihilation, it's naturally impossible for offspring to be conceived." "So what's your solution?" the god of destruction asked. "My first plan is to temporarily seal your power of destruction," Kong Ming'an said. "You would need only lower your power level from the God King level, perhaps even retreat temporarily to the first-rank deity level. At that point, the balance between you and the goddess of life will be broken, and her life power will be able to neutralize the destruction inside you. Your strength will be weakened for a time, but the possibility of conceiving offspring will increase greatly." The god of destruction considered this and found the method feasible. Temporarily self-sealing his power was no challenge for him. He was a natural divinity, not someone who couldn't control his own god position. But he still asked, expression unreadable, "And the second method?" Kong Ming'an smiled. "My spirit is rather special and can control all energy that belongs to me. Theoretically, if I had the power of destruction in my possession, I could analyze it, understand it, and study a solution. Of course, I can't do that right now, but if I grow to the divine rank, it shouldn't be too difficult." The god of destruction's eyes narrowed. After a moment, he reached a conclusion. "You want to use solving my offspring problem as leverage to have me protect you until you become a divinity. You are perceptive, Your Excellency." The god of destruction frowned. "I don't see why that conflicts with you inheriting my god position. If you become the legacy holder of my god position, I will naturally protect you. By inheriting the god position, you will also be able to grasp the power of destruction. Isn't that simpler than waiting for you to become a divinity on your own and then spending time analyzing my power? Besides, you have a demi-plane. You could take those around you to the god realm to live forever. Isn't that an excellent solution?" Kong Ming'an didn't contradict him. If he accepted the destruction god's legacy, he could receive direct protection and postpone the god test while continuing his research. He could become a divinity later. It was a perfectly viable path, but he preferred fairness. Please take it as a habit of mine. I like mutual benefit, fair trade. It makes me feel less burdened and more relaxed." He looked at the god of destruction and asked, "So, what do you think of this arrangement?" The god of destruction paused, then a rare, faint smile curved his lips. Appreciation deepened in his gaze. "I accept your proposal. I hope you do not disappoint me. I will do my best." "Do your best." The god of destruction chuckled. "I'll give you 1 month, 30 years on the Duluo plane. If you still haven't become a divinity by then, you will inherit the god position of the god of destruction." He set the deadline with a wave of his large hand. For a moment, Ming'an felt a strange déjà vu, like an elder making a bet with a junior. If you can't make a name for yourself outside, you must return to inherit the family business. A small, private amusement crossed his face. He bowed his head and nodded. Understood. Satisfied, the god of destruction grew increasingly fond of this person. Compared to the irresponsible Asura god who had abandoned a god position and run off, this one at least proposed a test for his legacy holder. With the most important matter settled, the god of destruction glanced into the distance where Daming and Erming hovered midair, awaiting judgment. Before he could act, Ming'an spoke again. "Your Excellency, if possible, may I have them?" "What for?" "They're divine beasts. Killing them outright would be such a waste," Ming'an said with a gentle smile. The god of destruction, who knew the boy's thrift and practical nature, understood at once. This kid didn't want to squander useful material. He waved his hand, stripping the traces of the earlier divine force from Daming and Erming, then steered another stream of destruction divine force into them. Unlike the previous divine force used to support their divine official strength, this new infusion was for control and subjugation. With another motion, a triangular mark filled with destruction divine force landed in Ming'an's palm. "This is a god test marker," the god of destruction said. "With it, if anything happens to you, I can intervene directly. You can also use it to command these 2 spirit beasts." "Thank you, Your Excellency." Ming'an received the marker. "Don't thank me," the god of destruction waved a dismissive hand. "As you say, it's mutual benefit." He lifted his gaze beyond the plane. The figure here was only an incarnation of divine force. His true body would already be aware of everything taking place. In the god realm, in the committee conference hall, his true form sat within the divine palace. The goddess of life stood beside her, and before them, bound by purple suppression, sat sea god Tang San with an extremely grim expression. The power of destruction shimmered about the god of destruction's true form, pressing Tang San down in his seat so he could not move. Fighting was forbidden near the center of the god realm, and merely using force to suppress someone was not technically combat. But Tang San was furious. He ground his teeth and frantically circulated his sea god power, trying to break the restraint, but he could not budge. His eyes had a hint of crimson as he glared at the god of destruction and shouted through clenched teeth, "Destruction, you have overstepped. How dare you interfere with the lower realm?" "Interfere?" The god of destruction narrowed his eyes and sneered. "I was merely confirming a god position legacy holder. How is that interference?" He paused, voice leveling into official authority. "Moreover, if not for this, I wouldn't have discovered how audacious you are. You indulged your divine official in an attempt to execute the child of destiny of that plane, to destroy the future of the plane, and to kill a god position legacy holder. Sea god Tang San, do you admit your guilt?" 36. Will of the plane. All in is a kind of wisdom. There was no doubt about it. This was an interrogation, and one backed by hard evidence. Tang San's face hardened, but he spoke plainly. "Those 2 spirit beasts are indeed divine officials under my command, but I had no knowledge of their actions." Without hesitation, he abandoned Daming and Erming, distancing himself and shifting the blame. "I never ordered them to assassinate a child of luck. Besides, I'm already a god king, and the Duluo plane falls under my jurisdiction. Why would I move against a child of luck?" "Yes, you're already a god king. Why would you move against a child of luck?" the god of destruction said coldly. He stood and with solemn authority announced, "Initiate a vote of the God Realm Committee. Sea God's subordinate divine officials, Nu Tian and Titan, attempted to kill a child of luck on the Duluo plane. Their actions were improper. I propose stripping them of their divine official status and demoting them to servants." The sea god indulged his subordinates and sought to interfere with the lower realm. "I propose temporarily suspending the sea god's direct observation and jurisdiction over the Duluo plane and temporarily sealing his god realm enforcer authority." Tang San, he tried to stop him, but the god realm's central hub had already activated under the god of destruction's command. Light flared, and a holographic image of the god realm committee descended. "Let's vote. I vote in favor." The god of destruction spoke first. In the next heartbeat, the gentle but firm voice of the goddess of life followed. Seconded. Jidong and Li Yan, who had until now been onlookers, exchanged glances, eyes widening in disbelief. This wasn't the first time the god of destruction had called for a vote to sanction the sea god. Historically, the three, Jidong, Li Yan, and the goddess of life, had abstained, while the god of destruction and the sea god opposed each other, making the vote invalid and leaving the matter unresolved. This time, though, the goddess of life had sided with the god of destruction. Silence. A look passed between Jidong and Li Yan, and both decisively raised their hands. Abstain. Tang San's face went completely dark. 2 votes in favor, 2 abstentions. His position no longer mattered. Through the god realm's central hub he felt, with cold clarity, his direct observation and interference authority over the Duluo plane, the power he'd used like an extension of himself, being sealed. It wasn't a total severing, but he could no longer observe the Duluo plane by normal means. Even lingering with his gaze risked punishment under God Realm rules. Sending down a divine decree or a divine thought was now utterly impossible. The god of destruction glanced at Tang San, then turned away and left the hall with the goddess of life. Jidong and Li Yan fled even faster, vanishing before the god of destruction was out of sight. For a moment, Tang San sat alone in the meeting chamber. He slammed his fist on the table. Rage and helplessness knotted his chest. Useless, utterly useless. They couldn't even deal with the miscreants who'd tried to kill a boy who hadn't even reached Spirit Grandmaster. He didn't know what they were good for. Veins crept into his eyes, and a surge of emotion sent a faint dark red blood mist curling up around him. A sudden rush of blue-gold sea god divine force flared from within him, straining to dissipate the bloody haze and briefly clearing his vision. Tang San forced his expression back to calm, though a shadow lingered in his eyes. The Asura god position was slipping again. He still couldn't fully control it. If this continued... He fell silent, seizing that brief window of clarity to frantically weigh options. Then he remembered something. He still had a divine thought he could use with the Clear Sky sect, and the god of destruction's words. Tang San's eyes brightened as a plan formed. They were all useless. In the end, he'd have to do it himself. A wry smirk creased his face, and his eyes shone with sudden resolve. While Tang San quietly plotted, the plain will of the Duluo plane once more moved in secret to reallocate luck. Outside Star Luo City, in the White Tiger Duke's mansion, a small blue-haired boy knelt beside his ailing mother's bed, praying for her recovery. The plain will's unseen hand brushed over him and silently took 3/4 of the remainder of his 40% luck. At the same time, the plain will began to rewrite the boy's future. A few days later, the boy would accidentally reveal his spirit eye while going out to buy medicine. An elder of the body sect passing by would notice him, cure his mother, and take both mother and son from the White Tiger Duke's mansion to the body sect to begin a new life. Compared to his original fate, the boy would suffer fewer hardships and have fewer companions. But he would also shoulder fewer burdens not meant for him, and he would live more happily. Hatred would still exist in him, but this time he would have the body sect behind him, protective and hot-tempered. After finishing with that thread, the Plainwill's hand moved on to the Stardew Great Forest. In the core of the Stardew Great Forest, beside the Lake of Life, the golden big cat had just finished a feast of brain flowers and was settling down with a satisfied look when it suddenly sprang awake, every hair on its body standing on end. Auspicious beast? The black-robed middle-aged man and the green-skirted woman looked up at the cat's alarm at the same time. "Uncle Detian, my luck has been stripped away," the golden cat said, voice trembling, almost sobbing. "What?" The black-robed man couldn't stay still. Luck attached to the Emperor Auspicious Beast represented their whole spirit beast line. If its luck fled, their species would be affected. This was terrible news. What's going on? Why did your luck suddenly run off? I, I don't know, the golden cat whimpered. She hadn't done anything in the past few days beyond overeating brain flowers. Could that have angered heaven? It's a tonic. I won't eat brain flowers anymore. Before the black-robed man could respond, a majestic, clear voice announced, "It's the plain will." 37. Curiosity from Miss Dragon King. The sudden sound left DTN momentarily stunned. He recovered quickly, turning with BG beside him and dropping to his knees, bowing respectfully toward the source. "Master, you are awake?" By the lakeshore, the space shimmered, and a stunning girl stepped out of the ripple. Her skin was pale and translucent. Silver hair, like falling snow, went down to her waist. Her eyes were amethyst, deep and otherworldly, utterly free of impurity. Tall and slender, she carried an aura of elemental purity and chill. She approached the three-eyed golden lion without haste. "Elder Sister Master." The golden lion's panic eased at the sight of her, and it nuzzled against her affectionately. The girl said nothing, simply lifting a hand to stroke the lion's head. Her touch was gentle, but her gaze remained composed. "Master, the auspicious beast's luck was stripped away by the plain will, and you've awakened. What's happening?" Ditian kept his head bowed, his voice respectful and urgent. The girl's hand paused. A flicker crossed her expression as she raised her head and looked toward the far distance, as if peering through endless space in the direction of the Sun-Moon Empire. "More than a year ago, there was already a major upheaval involving a division of luck," she said flatly, her voice steady. "I awakened then. At that time, the plane will focused on redistributing humanity's internal luck, so I paid it little mind. But now the plane will's division is too extensive. It's directly using the luck that belongs to our spirit beast race. I cannot stand aside." The large golden cat hesitated, then seemed to sense something and spoke. "The stripping of my luck has stopped for now, but the luck that remains is only about half of what I had before." The vertical eye on its forehead blinked oddly, and it turned its gaze in the same direction as the silver-haired girl. "I can vaguely sense where the luck I lost is collecting. It seems to be over there." Guyuna fell silent for a moment. She had already pieced it together. The plain will was making an all-or-nothing gamble, robbing the luck of existing human children of destiny and the spirit beasts to concentrate on cultivating a new child of destiny with far greater potential. But was such a gamble necessary? This was a division of luck, not like pouring water into cups and being able to pour it back if you changed your mind. Every division weakened the plain will to some degree. If someone took advantage during that weakened period, the consequences would be disaster. Unless the new child of destiny had an aptitude so extraordinary that the plain will was willing to go all in, lavishing what amounted to doting favor upon him. The thought appeared in Guyuna's mind almost effortlessly. She did not voice it, but an uncontrollable curiosity stirred within her as she watched the three-eyed golden lion rub against her palm. Her violet eyes shimmered, then steadied. After a pause, she spoke, unexpected in its directness. "Ditian, if I'm not here, you will take charge of the Star Do Great Forest." Ditian looked up, astonished. "Master? You?" She only glanced at him with cool indifference, then let her gaze drift back to the distant sky. "Not now. The thought only just occurred," she said. The light in her eyes flickered for a moment, ripples passing through them. "Able to make the plane will gamble everything? Truly?" Curious. The young Miss Dragon King hesitated over whether to contact this newly born child of destiny. On the other side, another central figure was counting his spoils. In the Sun-Moon Empire, within the secret chamber of the capital city hall of worship. During this time, Ming'an has relied on Elder Electrolux's care, someone said. "Mr. Kong overpraises me," Electrolux replied. "If it weren't for Ming'an, I would likely have perished long ago." "Elder Electrolux, no need to be modest. If not for you, Ming'an and I probably would have had a tragic end." "I'm not being modest, it's simply what I should have done," Electrolux answered calmly. Kong Ming'an stood nearby, half amused as the two senior figures exchanged modest praise. He shook his head with a wry smile and let them be. Turning his thoughts inward, he continued tallying the gains from the assassination attempt. First and most obvious, two divine beasts. Although Deming and Erming hadn't shown extraordinary performance in battle, their divine beast essences were priceless. Their blood, bones, muscle tissue, even their soul structures, each was research material far beyond ordinary 100,000-year soul beasts. They might even contain secrets of the divine rank, offering immeasurable value to both his body cultivator and spell cultivator systems. More importantly, these were renewable resources, far more useful than a soft-bones rabbit breeding base. Beyond the tangible loot, the implicit gain was even more significant: the protection and attention of the god of destruction. That promise carried far more weight than assurances from a certain pure and noble god king. With the god of destruction watching, the god king would not dare act underhandedly again, at least not openly. For Ming'an, the direct threat posed by that god king had been greatly reduced, buying him precious time to develop freely. With that greatest threat softened, he could ease his restraints in other areas, just a bit. For example, turning his attention, slightly, toward the Clear Sky sect, which had just lost its first and second sect masters. That shouldn't be excessive, right? He never denied his penchant for petty revenge. A grievance could and should be repaid. Plans involving Shrek could also grow bolder. He had a particular interest in Tang San's mother, or rather in that golden ancient tree. Midway through his scheming, Kong Ming'an looked up to the older man who was still quietly exchanging cultivation anecdotes with Electrolux. "Grandpa, for the next All-Continent Advanced Spirit Master Academy Soul Dueling Competition, can I be added as a participant for the Sun Moon Royal Soul Engineer Academy?" Kong Deming paused, surprised. Why the sudden desire to compete? He'd just survived an assassination attempt, and now his grandson wanted to enter a competition. Ming'an merely shrugged. "I heard the Sun Moon Royal Soul Engineer Academy has been stuck in second place for 10,000 years. I thought I'd try to break that streak. Relax a little." Kong Deming glanced at him, unable to accept such a seemingly pure motive, but after a beat he nodded. "All right, I'll arrange it, but as for who will protect you, just let Elder Yi follow. If even Elder Yi can't stop trouble, I'll call people. No, I mean, call a divinity." Ming'an flashed the mark of the god test of destruction on his palm, his tone casual. Kong Deming sighed, but said no more. He hadn't heard all the details of his grandson's later conversation with that divinity, but one line remained burned in his memory. "If you don't become a divinity within 30 years, obediently come back and inherit the god position." Those words had been uttered plainly by a divinity. Kong Deming smiled wryly to himself. Perhaps he should be more worried about others than about his own grandson. 38. Sooner or later, he will be eaten up. Sooner or later, he will be eaten up. After chatting some more, Elix and Kong Deming decided to withdraw for cultivation. As the saying goes, practice is the only test of truth. In the fight just now, once those two old hands had truly unleashed themselves, they had both gained a great many insights. It was necessary to seclude and refine the spell cultivator and body cultivator systems with those new understandings. When the two veterans left together, Kong Ming'an's eyes turned calmly to Daming and Erming, who stood a short distance away, sealed in silent stasis. After a moment's thought, he opened the demiplane with a gesture. Several advanced undead emerged from the doorway, the air around them cold with death. Pale blue undead flames burned in their eye sockets as they fixed their gaze on him, waiting wordlessly for orders. Kong Ming'an waved his hand, and 10 containers, each as tall as a person and able to hold at least 500 liters, materialized in front of the undead. He stroked his brow, drew out the blade of life, and tossed it into the hand of one of them. "Go bleed them and fill these up." The blade of life was meant for breaking defenses and drawing blood. The containers were to hold it. With the healing abilities of the divine beasts, filling them wouldn't be hard. Even if recovery fell short, the blade of life could restore vitality, enabling more extraction. Honestly, it looked like advanced spirit beast materials would never be in short supply. The advanced undead nodded and began to move, still a bit stiff in their motions. Using undead as assistants was never as smooth as one might hope. Kong Ming'an looked at the slightly vacant expressions on the undead as if he were looking at the junior students from his previous life who always needed somebody to clean up after them. The sight gave him a faint, inexplicable headache. Undead didn't tire or complain, but they lacked a certain intelligence. They were fine in battle, but inadequate for more nuanced scientific work. "I still need a few more assistants," he murmured. Miss Meng could do the work, but it would be better to have others handle it. With that matter filed, Kong Ming'an settled into secluded cultivation and study. Watching a top-level battle closely had been invaluable. Time passed quietly in his contemplation, and when he finally left the lab, several days had gone by. He teleported to his room out of habit and went straight to the bathroom for a shower. A little while later, wrapped in a bathrobe and damp hair, he stepped out into the warm, pale, steamy air and froze. On a lounge chair not far away, Miss Meng lounged languidly. She wore a fitted dress that ended at mid-thigh. A pair of conspicuous leg bands she'd put on accentuated her curves. The rise and fall of her chest showed with each breath, nothing exaggerated but well-developed, and the roundness that had once made her face look childlike had smoothed into softer, brighter lines, giving her a new, hard-to-define charm. She lay with her legs crossed, one foot hooked in a shoe so it dangled precariously while the other swung lazily. Kong Ming'an's gaze lingered a beat longer than he meant to. Miss Meng turned her head and caught him looking. A knowing smile curved her lips, as if to say, "I knew it." "Does it look good?" she asked. Kong Ming'an drew his eyes away, continued toweling his hair, and walked toward the wardrobe, answering like he was commenting on the weather. "So-so." Miss Meng's brows arched. She stopped the swing of her leg, planted her toes on the floor, and moved a little closer. "Just so-so? A little better than so-so?" He hedged. Miss Meng narrowed her eyes and provoked him. "Want to feel it? The texture's excellent, guaranteed." "No need." His tone was flat. "Should I put on the white ones? I brought black lace fishnets. Want to try them one by one?" She grinned, radiating a sly, feline smugness, clearly expecting him to cave. "Isn't that to satisfy you?" she added, feigning innocence. "Isn't it only a matter of time?" she said with a small snort, her smile widening. Around others, she kept up a bit of an act, but alone with him, she was too lazy to bother pretending. Her gaze flicked to his bathrobe. A dangerous thought crept across her face. He probably wasn't wearing anything underneath, right? What if he just... Kong Ming'an flicked her on the forehead. She grabbed the spot, pouted, and instantly a sheen of tears welled in her eyes, making her look comically wronged. "Why'd you hit me?" "What do you think?" he said, a touch helpless. He didn't know where Miss Meng had picked up such thoughts, but her head was full of them. She didn't deny it. She was used to Ming'an being stubborn and not giving in. She only needed to grow a little bigger, then he wouldn't escape her. She sat closer, and instead of continuing to tease him, she recounted what had happened during his absence, naturally including the ultimate-level battle in the Mingdu suburbs a few days earlier. An event like that drew attention, but few details were released. All that was known was that 4 people had been involved. Everything else remained a mystery. "I wanted to go watch with someone," she said with mock resentment, "but our busy Mr. Kong was holed up in the lab and wouldn't come out. It's not easy seeing him, sa." Kong Ming'an raised an eyebrow at the sourness in her tone, but moved to the wardrobe to fetch fresh clothes. He'd heard the hurt hidden under her joking. "My fault," he said without turning, his voice neutral. "Come with me to Shrek City later." Miss Meng's teasing words died partway out of her mouth. She blinked, then a smile like a kitten that had successfully filched a fish spread across her face. "Young Master Kong actually invited me out? Are you coming or not?" He turned with the clothes. "Yes, of course," she replied instantly. Opportunities to be alone were rare, especially since a certain Your Highness had arrived, so she wasn't going to miss this one. "Then go out first, I'm changing." She blinked and unconsciously scooted a little closer. "Can I watch?" "What do you think?" he said exasperatedly. "Tsk, all right." She feigned disappointment but didn't mean it. She had the same private thought as always. She would get him, sooner or later. Shrek City, Mingmeng Commerce, Vice President's office. The gray door of the demiplane opened silently, and Kong Ming'an, in white casual clothes, stepped out, followed by Meng Hongchen. Zhu Zi, busy at her desk, looked up. Her chestnut hair slid off her shoulder. When she saw them, her eyes flickered for a moment before settling into a warm, professional smile. Rising, she gave a slight, respectful bow. Her fitted uniform shifted with the movement, subtly accentuating her figure. In a soft, courteous voice, she said, "President, you've returned." She stood fully and glanced at Meng Hongqin behind Kong Ming'an, bowing once more. "Miss Meng, long time no see." "Long time no see, Sister Juzi," Meng Hongqin replied. She watched Juzi's careful movements. Something about them felt deliberate. Narrowing her eyes, Miss Meng adjusted her stance and with a casual grace revealed that her hand was intertwined with someone else's. With a friendly tone, she added, "Are you still busy, Sister Juzi?" "It's my duty, just part of the job," Juzi answered, her voice as gentle as ever. She reached for the folder beside her out of habit, then looked to Kong Ming'an. "President, would you like a report on the commerce's recent status?" "No need. Meng and I are just out for a walk," Kong Ming'an said. He noticed a trace of fatigue in Juzi's expression. "Have you been particularly busy lately?" Juzi hesitated, then explained, "Heaven Dew City is hosting the next Advanced Spirit Master Academy Doluo tournament. The Heaven Dew Imperial family has entrusted us with part of the tournament's business. Since it involves the Imperial family, there were a number of transfer details that needed my approval, so it took longer than usual." "I see." Kong Ming'an nodded, understanding. After a moment, he took a small emerald green vial from his storage ring and set it on the table. It glittered faintly with life energy. "Life essence will soothe the body," he said, "but for mental fatigue, you should rest. Sleep is still best." Juzi stared at the vial for a long instant before speaking, strangely hesitant. "Thank you, President." "Consider it an employee benefit," Kong Ming'an replied with a smile. "Meng and I will go on ahead. Take your time, Sister Juzi." "Yes, President." Juzi returned her gentle smile as they left, watching them go. As the door shut, her eyes inevitably dropped to the small vial on the desk. She pressed her lips together, her expression clouded as if lost in thought. "You're very considerate toward your employees, handing out gifts like that?" Meng Hongqin murmured under her breath, a teasing note in her tone. Kong Ming'an glanced at her with mild surprise, then shook his head. "I don't want to take advantage of them," he said. Miss Meng clicked her tongue softly. For the moment, she believed he truly meant it. No ulterior motive, just concern for an employee. But she couldn't help replaying the past, first promising her revenge and granting power, then giving her purpose and helping anchor a new spirit. If she were in Juzi's place, she'd probably let her thoughts wander. And besides, that certain someone was rather good-looking. If this continued, Miss Meng thought ruefully, she might face more than one rival. The thought left her momentarily distressed. The two stepped out of the Commerce Building and blended into the bustling streets of Shrek City. Meng Hongqin set her worries aside. It had been a long-awaited outing, and she intended to relax. She wandered past stalls selling trinkets and paused at a street performer who displayed spirit master tricks. Shrek City's prosperity and cultural life were unrivaled in Duluo, and there was always something to draw the eye. Kong Ming'an walked beside her, scanning the surroundings. At one point, his gaze swept past the window of a private tea house across the street and met a pair of clear, slightly tired eyes. Zhang Lexuan sat inside, a cup of clear tea in her hand, watching the restaurant opposite the tea house. Their eyes met briefly. Kong Ming'an paused and offered a polite, slight nod and a faint smile as a greeting. Then he withdrew his gaze and continued walking with Meng Hongqin, who was pointing at a nearby sugar painting stall and chattering about it. At the tea house window, Zhang Lexuan's hands stilled. She remembered seeing that handsome young man once before at the commerce entrance. Then he had been with a purple-haired young lady. Now he was with a silver-haired girl. Did he change companions so easily? She frowned, then shook her head and dismissed the thought. Shrek City wasn't all that large, and someone like him was hard to miss. It was probably just coincidence. She finished the cooling tea and fixed her attention back on the scene below. She'd come because she'd discovered someone in Shrek Outer Court's logistics department was reselling Academy resources, and she was waiting for them to show up. Tired, she rubbed her temples and forced herself to stay alert. She couldn't understand why so much filth hid within Shrek, but she was determined to clean it up. Slow progress, perhaps, but progress nonetheless. Zhang Lexuan exhaled and gathered her scattered spirit. Kong Ming'an watched her for a moment from across the street and felt a faint swell of sympathy for his nominal clan sister. Trying to save a great tree whose roots were already rotten was dangerous. The rescuers might be crushed by falling branches, and then everyone would blame the one who tried to save it. The despair that would follow could swallow anyone. He shook the thought off. Today was for enjoying time with Miss Meng. Everything else could wait. Their outing ended on a relaxed, subtly charged note. Back at Mingmen Commerce headquarters, the two were preparing to return to Mingdu through the demiplane when Juzi pushed the office door open with an urgency that replaced her usual composure. She bowed to Kong Ming'an, acknowledged Meng Hongchen with a nod, and then hurried into her report. "President," she said, the words rushing out, "a subordinate reported, 'We found something from the list you asked us to search for.'" "Something from the list?" Kong Ming'an raised an eyebrow. He had indeed given Juzi a list of treasures and rare items that appeared in the original records. The Ice Jade Scorpion's left foreleg bone auctioned off, the myriad-year profound ice marrow of the Earth Dragon sect, and the like. But Juzi's expression suggested this was no ordinary find. "Yes." Juzi drew in a breath, her voice low but steady, each word precise. "Our Star Luo City branch acquired a 100,000-year spirit beast embryo." Kong Ming'an, teacup halfway to his lips, froze. A 100,000-year spirit beast embryo, 40, so beautiful that it makes people want to dissect it. Inside the highest-level isolation laboratory of the undead demiplane, 3 figures stood before the central platform, all watching a rhomboid crystal suspended in midair. Within the crystal, a faintly fluctuating stream of chi was sealed, shining an impossibly pure white as it darted left and right, as if trying to break free. When it collided with itself, a violent vitality and bone-deep cold seemed to emanate from it. This was the 100,000-year spirit beast embryo, more precisely, the Snow Empress embryo. 2 super-old figures stood behind him. Kong Ming'an stood outside the protective shield, his gaze steady on the Snow Empress embryo, but a strange, inexplicable absurdity had arisen in his chest. In the original timeline, this embryo should have been bought by Xiao Hongchen at an auction in Star Luo City 5 years later. Then, when the body sect invaded Mingde Hall, the Snow Empress would self-destruct, leaving a trace of her origin behind in Huo Yuhao's mental sea. He had added the embryo to his list as a material, expecting to obtain it years from now. How had it arrived here now? A butterfly effect? A maneuver of the plane will? Kong Ming'an was mildly unsettled, but he stepped forward. Threads of mental force extended from him and severed several key nodes of the god-sealing platform. The pure white light in the crystal flared and convulsed. An overwhelming burst of keen, frigid aura shattered the seals. Brilliant ice-blue light flooded the laboratory. After the blinding flash, the embryo had vanished. In its place floated a young woman in an ice-blue gown. Tall and lithe, the folds of her dress accentuated a clear, exquisite silhouette. Snow-white hair fell to her waist, the tips moving as if stirred by a breeze that did not exist. Her face was pale and composed, cold, indifferent, and naturally regal. She was the Snow Empress, head of the 3 kings of the land of extreme north, the Ice Sky Snow Maiden. Kong Ming'an stared, a faint blue glow reflected in his eyes. He found himself murmuring, almost involuntarily, "So beautiful." It wasn't lust. From his special energy perception, her very existence was perfection in energetic structure. Born of the purest ice-attributed heaven and earth force at the core of the land of extreme north, every energy node, every flow of energy in her form obeyed some heavenly Tao. She was a naturally formed, naturally nurtured entity, an aesthetic that transcended ordinary notions of beauty and reached the origin itself. Kong Ming'an admitted, with a little shame, that the sight stirred a scientist's curiosity so intensely he felt the urge, absurd as it sounded, to dissect a humanoid creature. He chided himself silently for losing his composure. The Snow Empress blinked, a trace of daze in her ice-blue eyes. She sensed the human presences immediately. Daze hardened into vigilance. Her icy spirit power began to flow, and instinct urged her to annihilate everything around her. But just as her devastating cold was about to erupt, 2 incomparably powerful auras locked onto her. One was deathly still and holy, the other bore a raw, furnace-like bloodline pressure. Either aura would demand a peak cultivator's full attention, Confronted by both at once while still weakened from the ceiling, she felt a mortal-level threat. She forced down her attack. Her eyes swept the laboratory and settled on Kong Ming'an, the seemingly weakest figure who stood at the center. She could feel the two terrifying auras orbiting that human, guarding him as their core. The Snow Empress's voice was clear and crystalline, like striking ice. "Human, where am I? Who are you?" Kong Ming'an reined in his analytical stare and returned his usual calm. "This is my laboratory. I am Kong Ming'an. Snow Empress, welcome to Awakening. The occasion may not be to your liking, but I come with sincerity." Sincerity? Her gaze sharpened as she glanced at the two ancient figures behind him, then back to him. "Your sincerity is imprisonment?" "Not imprisonment," Kong Ming'an said. "I'm actually rescuing you." Rescuing? Her contempt was icy. Sealed by humans during her transformation and left in darkness for who knew how long, would she trust any human? Only the threat of the two powerful beings behind Kong kept her from striking. "Humans are all bad," she added coldly. Kong had expected such a reaction and made a mental note in his little book about her temperament. He smirked inwardly at his own pettiness and continued without hurry. "I know what you've suffered, and I know you can't trust humans now, but perhaps we can make a deal." "A deal?" She frowned, tone still frosty. "I can help you safely pass your next 700,000-year heavenly tribulation," Kong said evenly. "I can also help with the Ice Empress's 390,000-year heavenly tribulation." Her ice-blue pupils rippled slightly, emotion touching her usually impassive face. "Do you know what you're promising?" she asked, still cautious. "Of course." Kong's lips curved into a small smile, like bait sinking into a fish's mouth. He met her gaze, then casually laid out the stakes he'd bring to the table. "Beyond dealing with your heavenly tribulation and the Ice Empresses, I can even help protect the entire land of Extreme North, shield it from excessive human encroachment. Even if you survive your tribulation, you alone might not be able to defend it." The Snow Empress bristled. If a mere human youth could truly solve her tribulation and the Ice Empresses, it would be almost believable that he possessed incredible methods. But to promise protection of an entire domain, what right did he have? Before she could speak, Kong raised his hand and revealed a dark purple triangular mark on his palm. Within that mark flashed a trace of divine force tinged with destruction. This was a divine test,